And just for the record, this is Amy Gutierrez, professional member. I just joined the meeting. Thank you very much, Victor, for managing the meeting. I really appreciate it. So we're moving to licensing committee. It's the next item on the agenda. Grab that. The licensing committee report. Members of this committee, and Stan Weiser is the chair of the licensing committee. I've stepped in to assist Stan, who has temporarily been unable to chair this committee. So he asked me to step in his stead. So I'll be doing the report as the acting chairperson. Attach a report of committee meetings held on August 22nd and October 27th. The first one is discussion and consideration of the licensing requirements for an advanced pharmacy technician. So the licensing committee is offering recommendations to the board, and this is legislation, right, Jenny? That we'll have to do. To establish an advanced pharmacy technician license type. And the recommendation comes after 2 meetings where the committee discussed the concept as well as the framework for this new license. As part of the development of the proposal, the committee focused on how such the framework would benefit consumers. The whole focus is on benefiting consumers. The committee believes the primary benefit is in creating this new category of license would be to allow a pharmacist to have the time to be redirected to provide more direct patient care activities, particularly as we have the advanced pharmacist license as well. And that will allow the pharmacist to increase interaction with consumers while advanced pharmacy technician is redirected to perform specific distribution duties. In general, the provisions create a definition of advanced pharmacy tech to include, in definition, an individual licensed by the board who is authorized to perform pharmacy technician tasks as authorized in BPC 41-15.6. An APT would also be authorized to perform any of the duties of a pharmacy tech. So it could still be a pharmacy tech, they would just have an advanced license, much like we've done with the pharmacist. In addition to the proposed definition, the committee considered the appropriate minimum requirements for licensure. And there's a lot of discussion, and Debbie pipe in as well, because I know you were really active in that discussion as well. And after consideration at the 2 meetings, the committee is recommending the following general criteria for licensure. 1 is to hold an active pharmacy technician license, so you have to have the base license. 2, possess a certification by a pharmacy technician certifying program, so that's PTCB or EXCPT. And 3, obtain a minimum of an AA degree in pharmacy technology or a bachelor's degree. And this was the point that was added at the last meeting, so I want to highlight this. Or completion of a training program approved by the board. So that was added as another option. So a technician may not have completed an AA or a bachelor's, but completed a training program.
And actually, Amy, we added bachelor's degree in the last meeting too.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, thanks, Debbie, for clarifying that. We had the bachelor's because the point that was made, and it made sense, is it may not be an AA. Some people may have just gone all the way to a bachelor's.
Do you have any idea what that training?
Can't hear you.
Do we have any idea what that training program would include?
I think that would be determined by the board. I think much like what we've done with the advanced pharmacist training program, we would have to approve it. The content and the...
Right.
And
there is like a program out there, but we decided instead of like globbing onto one program, that we would just kind of have a placeholder so that we could be more flexible.
But it's basically a certification program.
That we would approve.
They would get a certificate.
And 4, have 3,000 hours of pharmacy technician experience would be the 4th requirement. Or, instead of those 4, have graduated from a school of pharmacy. Finally, the committee is offering a recommendation to establish the renewal requirements, including 1, 20 hours of CE, including 2 hours of CE in medication error prevention and 2 hours of board-sponsored law and ethics, and also maintain certification by a pharmacy technician certifying program while they're licensed. As part of the discussion, I'm sorry, Victor, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a comment. Besides the 4 or the 5th requirement, I like to see there should be a standardized examination, just like the CPJE. You could have people go to different classes, go to different certificate program, but there ought to be a standardized exam administered by the board to make sure that you have a uniform knowledge of everything that we need.
Well, you were kind of
Idea
doing
that-
that with having them. They have to pass the PTCB or the accept.
But that's just a minimum requirement to get into a pharmacy technician, not necessarily an advanced pharmacy technician.
I think you raise a good point, just because of the fact that there's so much variability in some of the training and the programs,
Right.
and
I
you at
agree.
least can control the content, because these are people who are going to be approving prescriptions.
Right.
Good
Well,
idea, Victor.
but right now PTCP gets you in, but you have to have the certificate, because a lot of people, I think what they do is they get in with the PTCB or accept, but then they don't maintain that certificate. So this, in order to become an advanced practice technician, you would have to maintain the PTCB, which means you have to stay current and take CE. So and if you haven't, then you'd have to go back and retake that exam.
So I've interviewed pharmacy techs that have gotten their license just by taking the PTCB. I mean, not to say that they would be advanced, but they've never walked into a pharmacy and they just studied for the exam and they passed it.
Yeah, but then Amy,
I
remember
just wonder of the content and the
but we're adding. Then you also have to have 3,000 hours.
right. But I'm just saying, if someone can pass the exam without having walked into a pharmacy, I just wonder how
Yeah.
strict that
How good is
exam.
that exam?
Right? I mean, that's the only, and I would think one that we administered would probably be a little tougher.
The problem is the mechanics of doing it. You know, the fact that the competency exam, for example, as Victor knows, as Victor's well aware of, you know, is so painful to construct and painful to make sure that it's valid, etc. If we had to go through something like that with the technicians, I don't know that we'd ever get through it. You know, so I like the idea, but I'm concerned with the practicality.
But you will have the teachers from the different schools that will be happy to come in to compose the questions.
I like
Right?
it.
I mean, they were happy to sit on this board to
There
put
you
in the
go.
questions. So,
Yeah.
all right, I'm sure.
Okay, I'm just afraid if we throw an exam in there. I mean, I think part of what we're trying to do is make an opportunity for these technicians to practice at a higher level. I'm not, you know, if we're already in our committee, we've talked about a lot of the barriers that we're potentially putting in place. I'm afraid the exam is a barrier for people
Well,
to become an advanced practice
Our
tech.
job is to
And it's
protect the
always done
consumer.
under it's always done
Okay.
under the supervision of a pharmacist. So there's nothing that they're doing that's not under the supervision of a pharmacist.
But they're going to be checking prescriptions, Debbie, right? A pharmacist wouldn't have checked it. So we have medication errors that happen right now, even with the pharmacist. Not to say it's not going to
Yeah.
happen, but they're going to be checking
I
prescriptions.
think that's a good idea.
Well, if you go to the Iowa, the article that we had, where they have tech in the community setting, they actually they don't have half the requirements we have. They don't have a test, and they have found a huge increase in, or maybe a huge decrease in errors from the tech. So, I mean, I think it goes to prove that it's not necessary.
So, as part of its discussion, the committee considered the current marketplace, but also anticipated progression in the pharmacy profession, including expanded roles pharmacists may have in providing direct patient care. The committee noted the importance of identifying duties that can be performed by pharmacy personnel that possesses appropriate training and education. Based on articles and position statement, it's clear that nationally there is a recognition that pharmacy operations need to change to allow for the opportunity for direct patient care by the pharmacist. The committee's recommendation takes a similar approach to the advanced practice pharmacist legislation enacted through Senate Bill 493. Such an approach allows for a more robust reassignment of duties that do not require professional judgment and addresses liability concerns expressed by the committee. Further, the approach is flexible and will allow for an easy response to a dynamic marketplace, allow for appropriate tools for the board to meet its consumer protection mandate, and allow PICs to decide if they'll use the proposed authorized duties for these advanced techs and allow them to pharmacy techs to continue functioning in their current capacity if they so choose. So for board consideration and action, the committee is providing recommendations that would facilitate the creation of an advanced pharmacy technician licensing category. And as Ginny stated, this will be legislation. As part of the recommendation, the committee is offering several motions, and we're seeking policy guidance from the board. So does the board, first of all, the other thing that we discussed is because the practices are so different with hospital and retail, that we have advanced practice pharmacy tech for hospitals that would match the hospital pharmacy license, and one for retail that would match the outpatient pharmacy license. So we would have two, one focused on community ambulatory and a second focus on inpatient, because the duties would be very different. So is so the committee, so what do you guys think about that? I mean, before that's a policy.
Makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely necessary, I think, because the hospital duties are so different than the
Right.
Albert?
Yeah, I think during our committee meeting that we talk about the job description before we talk about the requirement. I think we might have to do the same thing here because if we know what it involves, then we know what kind of education they require.
Good point. So the committee recommendation is to pursue, there's actually three motions. The first is to pursue a statutory change to add the definition of advanced pharmacy technician. The draft language is included as part of Attachment 1, which is proposed Business and Professions Code Section 4038.5. That's the first one.
Okay.
It's basically just creating, that one's just the licensing requirement. It just basically is a definition, and then it has the proposed. So on there, though, is do you want to make a motion to add a licensing test or exam on there, Victor?
That's for the requirement. That's the
Yes.
second motion. Yes.
That's
Yes.
this one right here, right?
Yeah, this is just a definition.
Oh, the definition. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So you have a second motion for the
definition.
requirements.
Do the first one first, and then let's do that.
Yeah, the first one's just advanced pharmacy tech means an individual licensed by the board who's authorized to perform technical pharmacy tasks as authorized in section 4115.6. Such an individual may also perform non-discretionary tasks as specified in section 4115. So that's the motion from the committee. Before we take a vote, let's do public comment or any comments.
Okay. Do you have to include that they have to pay another special fees, or that's not necessary? That's not this
the
far.
definition.
Not the definition.
Now.
Okay. That's
We can get to that later.
Public comment on the definition of advanced pharmacy tech. Okay, all those in favor?
Wow.
Go on record, this is my left hand.
Second motion is to pursue statutory change to add the licensing requirements of advanced pharmacy technician. And that is in draft language is included in attachment 1, which is essentially what we just talked about, all those 4 things that are required. Victor.
that I would like to add the requirement to take a standardized exam.
So maybe, do we need to vote down the motion from the committee, Laura, before we add that? Got it. Okay. Any other board comments regarding this before we take public comment? This is basically on 4211 as it stands. Public comment. Good afternoon, Angie.
Good afternoon, Angie Minetti with the California Retailers Association. Wanted to first wanted to applaud the board and the licensing committee for moving in this direction. I think in general, when we talk about APT, enhancing career ladders and creating career ladders, we foresee as only beneficial to the profession and also complementary to the goals and efforts of SB 493. We were very pleased with the changes that licensing committee had come out with last meeting last week, I believe, which added some additional pathways for licensure. I wanted to take a moment before we get into the new motion that's on the table to talk about what is proposed currently. On the 3,000 hours piece, there is a requirement for APTs to have been working as an experienced pharmacy technician for at least 3,000 hours. That's about working hours. That equates to about 18 months in a pharmacy. When we look at SB 493 and the requirements that pharmacists have to, the clinical experience that pharmacists have to have before they pursue APP licensure, that our statute says at least 1 year, which equates to 2,000 working hours. Now, still, during that year, that pharmacist that's a candidate for APP licensure will be engaging in clinical services and providing such clinical services. Under the requirement for APTs, if you're going to require 3,000 hours, those 3,000 hours are only really just experienced in their existing pharmacy technician duties that do not relate to the advanced duties that are proposed. Whereas when we look at 493, pharmacists are actually doing these clinical services for at least a year before they get their licensure. We believe that 1,500 hours was sufficient, which in working hours, that's about 9 months if you have a pharmacy technician working full time. If we're just looking to have a pharmacy technician and ensure that that checkbox is there, that they have the experience and have worked in a pharmacy, we believe that amount of time is sufficient because it's coupled with additional education. It's coupled with whatever certificate, whatever program the board recognizes for training with respect to these advanced duties, and that is advanced duties, checking the labels, making sure that the quantities and dosages are accurate and correspond. And then I'm sure that the board will probably pursue additional education as it relates to the administration of immunizations. And so I think when we look at, and I know the licensing committee was very sensitive to this as well, to ensure that the licensing requirements corresponded with the advanced duties. So we want to offer that on the table as well and see if the board would be willing to modify the hourly requirement for experience. Part of this is because we've seen in other states that have had very high hourly requirements that it will take technicians a lot longer to pursue APT. And we're concerned that if you have, for example, a technician that would like to move much higher in the profession and they're pursuing an associate's degree, they're not going to be full-time pharmacy technicians. And so to meet even the hourly requirement for them to be an APT after they complete their 2-year degree could still take a significant amount of time. And so I'd like the board to just consider that and consider sort of any barriers to entry or how we could potentially slow down the pace of this pipeline. One more point that I would like to make on the exam, the new motion on the table as well. The current APT licensure does require that APTs not only have current license standing, but also ensure that they are either PTCB or accept certified. And so I would want to at least have the board maybe reconsider and take a look at those tests, those testing requirements, and see if we believe those testing requirements coupled with the additional certification and education programs that these APTs are taking is sufficient for them to satisfy the duties of checking labels and providing immunizations and also handling transfer requests of new prescriptions or renewals as well. Again, making sure that the licensing and education that we are putting forth for APTs is commensurate to the type of work and duties they will be performing, because we certainly want to make sure that there is going to be an uptake for APT licensure. We don't want to see this happen maybe 5, 7, 10 years from now, and so these are things that we have an opportunity to consider at this point in time for the future of this profession.
So just a question, because I know that with a pharmacist license, when they become APP, I don't think you can really say this. That's the same thing for a pharmacist becoming APP as a pharmacy tech to be advanced. Because a pharmacist, in order for you to get a pharmacy degree, you have to have so much training. The intern hour requirements are there. And you've also, most of them have actually really worked. with this situation, you can actually get a pharmacy tech license without even having stepped the door in a pharmacy. So if we're going to say that and then 1,500 hours would really qualify you, do we really have the best qualified people? Specifically when we had one of the professors from Toro tell us that experience is the most valuable part of being a pharmacy tech. I mean, I'm just wondering on cutting down the hours, whether and these pharmacy techs are actually going to be the last barrier between a patient and from a safety perspective. I just want to make that comment just from the discussions that we had at the licensing committee.
I think 2,000 hours plus the additional test would probably be okay. 1,500 too light, no additional test. Don't think it cuts it.
Can I point out that in requirement number 2, they have to get an associate's degree in pharmacy technology, which is quite a few tests over a couple of years, a bachelor's degree, or a board-approved training program, which they're also getting tests for competency. So I'm not sure that we need to have them, we're requiring them to get a degree in pharmacy technology or go through an advanced pharmacy technician training program, which includes numerous tests along the way, that we need to add another test at the end issued by the Board of Pharmacy. They're like apples and oranges, I know, the APT and the APP, but I mean, we in the APP we also allow testing along the way. So I just think that just adds, that doesn't get us anything, because we're actually having a test as they're going through the different modules to get their AA or get their board training program.
They don't have to. So they could actually get a bachelor's degree in finance and they can qualify, right?
Well, so I would agree, and that was one of my concerns actually when we talked about the bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
So I would say if we're letting them have a bachelor's degree in finance, then I'm with you that there needs to be a test. But I think if they're getting there through the AA's degree in pharmacy technology, or if they're going through a board-approved training program for advanced pharmacy technician, that the testing's been done. If they're coming in with the bachelor's degree, that's the one I'm not exactly sure that makes sense. Then I would agree with you. In that case, yeah, let's make them.
Amy?
Then maybe we throw the test piece in there.
Albert.
Yeah, go back to the job description for the advanced practice technician. If you talk about they are able to take in new prescription and new narcotic order, and it's intimidating enough for pharmacists to take order from a doctor with all the experience they have, all the education they have. They feel intimidated. Doctor not gonna spell out the drug name for you, and they're very impatient. So if you don't have the background, if you don't have the knowledge, you make a mistake, like you say, the PIC go responsible for it. The PIC not gonna even listen to the order. They even have any way to check the order, and they're responsible for the mistake. So I mean, it's very. If you talk about consumer safety, I would make sure they have the qualification in order to be able to do those tests.
And I think Angie actually raised a really good point I hadn't thought about before, is the hours of experience that we're requiring are not the hours in training to be a advanced pharmacy technician. At least with the APP, we did do that. This is actually not. So we're basically just having to rely on a test, because there really is no active, unless we include hands-on training as an intern or something as part of our requirement of the board certification program, because they won't have had any experience.
Difficult to
Yeah.
do.
Yep, that's a good point. Thank you, Angie. Any other public comment? Good afternoon.
Robert Stein from KGI School of Pharmacy. I strongly believe that there needs to be a certification test by the board. And what Dr. Veal was saying makes sense from the standpoint that, yes, they're going to have taken many tests, but how about us pharmacists? We took a lot of tests in school. We still had to take a state exam.
That's true.
Right.
And a
again,
CPJE on top of that.
yes. The point is that this is to ensure safety of the public. And I would be very uncomfortable with any technician that doesn't have at least 3,000 hours of experience, a year and a half, before they can qualify to do this. I think it would be a mistake to require any less than that. Thanks.
So can I ask you, since you're from the School of Pharmacy, one of the concerns we had and we talked about at the licensing committee is the whole purpose of this is to free up the pharmacists to do clinical duties. And we struggled with that as to whether this would really do that or would it allow pharmacies to do with less pharmacists. How do we, I mean, what can we put in? And I've actually talked to USC School of Pharmacy to ask them the same thing. What can we add to ensure, because I know the tech law does require for clinical duties to be performed in a hospital. What are some of the things we could consider to make sure those hours are actually spent towards patients, not just to reduce the bottom line?
Yeah, I think that's really going to be a tough one. And obviously the employers are going to have a lot of pressure to reduce costs. And obviously they'll be paying these advanced practice technicians more than they would the regular technicians.
But less than a pharmacist.
But much less than a pharmacist. Yeah. So yeah, I agree that there's a risk there that all we're going to be doing is increasing the number of technicians and basically reducing the number of pharmacists, but they're not going to be doing patient care. So I think that's a very valid question. In terms of specifics, I would need to kind of ruminate on that to give you some ideas.
I think it'd be great to get some ideas from the pharmacy schools on what could we really place
Can't you
as
cover
clinical.
that by dealing with the pharmacist-technician ratio requirement?
But that wouldn't really necessarily guarantee the number, the quality. So, like for example, I just saw what was it,
You
Chicago
couldn't
or
reduce
something?
the number of pharmacists if you have a required ratio.
But if you bring in an advanced pharmacy tech that can actually check prescriptions, you can actually do more. So let's say that I'm like on the border and I'm working by myself in a pharmacy. Let's say I'm in Albert's pharmacy and he says, how many prescriptions do you fill per day for a pharmacist? Say 150. And I get to 180, 200. Do I really need to add another pharmacist or could I just put in an APTT to help out Albert? So it may, and that's the concern. And will it really lead to improved counseling, improved clinical services, and service to the public?
Except today you couldn't do that.
If I replace one of my techs with an APTT?
Oh, I thought what you said is you were going to add a tech instead of a pharmacist.
Well, I just replaced. Just get rid of one of the techs and add in an APT.
She's saying that an APT, that the ratio requirement wouldn't be the same with an APT as it is with a regular PT.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would always probably have my number one tech be an APT because they're going to be so much more valuable. But it doesn't change the ratio. I still only get one tech.
And that's where I was going with it. Why would it change the ratio?
No, it wouldn't. I don't know unless we decide to go that route. But I'm just saying, is that really going to buy? What can we do to make it buy more clinical services to the public?
Again, if you cannot reduce the number of pharmacists, if you can't reduce the number of pharmacists for an APT any different, if the ratio would have to be the same with an APT or a PT, then, I mean, the pharmacist is going to have time to do those additional, to do the consult and so on.
What do you guys think?
Well, then you need to really mandate the pharmacist going to be right in the front of the counter to check on everyone giving out the prescription to the patients. And even if the APT fill the prescription, the pharmacist will be the end one doing to check it before he dispenses or she dispenses it to the patient.
Which I think is the other, public safety issue. And, frankly, from a professional liability standpoint, as a pharmacist, if the technicians are basically doing everything and including verifying the label against the drug, I agree. If pharmacists actually do the counseling, that's the opportunity, the last best hope of catching any kind of medication error, including the wrong medication.
Including refills is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good
my experience is that when I'm working by myself as a pharmacist alone, I don't have as much free time or a little more detail to explain to the patient. So now when I have 2 or 3 other pharmacists working with me, I could relax, I could sit down and go into detail and discuss with the patient. I feel I could do a lot more consultation when that's extra pharmacist help, not as the extra technician help.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like the scope of the APT is really kind of in between a technician and a pharmacist, but including some of the tasks that traditionally have been done exclusively by pharmacists. So, yeah, I agree. I think it's really a difficult question to find that balance and to ensure that employers aren't taking advantage of the law to simply reduce the number of pharmacists they employ and increase the number of techs.
Okay, but remember, these are the non-judgmental tasks that the pharmacists are doing. So these are the non-clinical tasks. So we're trying to free up the pharmacists from the non-judgment tasks, the mundane tasks, to free them up so that they can interact with the patient.
I absolutely agree. I guess that's the question: is will they actually spend that free time to spend more time with the patient? That's I think a real concern, and the board knows that currently counseling in pharmacies is pretty dismal throughout the state.
It's because we have so many requirements. I mean, we have to give them a tool, and the advanced practice technician is that tool to get them out. Now, if we're able to give them an advanced practice technician, and they don't get out there and perform clinical services and work with the patient, then we have some serious issues. In our last licensing meeting, I think as we get through our notes here, we kind of addressed that okay, pharmacists, we're giving you a tool. Now you have a little bit higher clinical bar, but we have to take away these tasks from them. We can't have our cake and eat it too. So we have to take away these tasks. And the technicians, the studies that we've studied in the last 2 or 3 meetings, they do them really, really well, and in some cases better than the pharmacists, these non-judgmental, these mundane tasks.
But Debbie, do we really believe that these clinical duties and the counseling isn't performed because the pharmacist doesn't want to do it, or is it because they don't have the time? That's my concern. Is there's an assumption that we're going to free them up and now we're going to turn to them. I think a lot of times we give them ratios and we give them duties. You have so many prescriptions to fill. You've got this light that comes on if you don't do things in 15 minutes. There's a lot of things that we put in place as employers, and I'm talking about myself included, that are we really, I don't know if it's really the pharmacists, but is it the way that we manage our businesses in pharmacy that does that?
Well, I mean, I think part of the problem is we have all those requirements that the pharmacist has to be hands-on that they don't need to be hands-on. So I do think the pharmacists, most of them, do want to get out there and perform clinical, but they can't because they're so burdened with having to check every prescription and put their initial. We have a lot of tasks that they're burdened with. So I do think we'll get them out there. Will we get every one of them? No. But then that's going to be our responsibility to make sure to deal with those situations and say, we gave you the tool, you're not doing the consultation, now you're going to get written up for consultation. I mean, I know we do it now too, but I think we're going to have to, if we really want to get to consultation, we have to give them some tools.
If you have the right people, it'll work.
Right.
But with respect to refills, who is going to be the final check in that situation? That's my understanding from the way this is written, that the tech would check the other tech and confirm, or the tech would check to make sure the medication is correct. The pharmacist, at least now, has no legal duty to consult on a refill. Is the pharmacist ever going to actually inspect that final product?
Are you advocating that maybe advanced practice pharmacy tech pharmacies have a pharmacist check every prescription, counsel on every prescription?
Well, that would certainly be one solution, but I don't think that would be a very popular idea, frankly. But I guess what I'm advocating is
It would get them in front of the patient.
At least at the well, that's true too. But at least at that final step after the techs have done their things, and presumably 99.99% of the time everything's going to be fine, but have the pharmacist still perform that final check. So
But
they can
then,
basically...
Rob, you're not freeing the pharmacist up. I mean, so what's the purpose of tech, check, tech? Once again, I go back to the study that was done in Iowa by a retail chain and the state board, and they actually found that the techs did a better job than the pharmacists and decreased errors. So, and other states, for once, California's not on the cutting edge here. We're like about 10 or 15 behind, and this is happening, and we need to let it happen. We need to let go. We need to let it happen. It is for the betterment of the consumer.
I certainly don't disagree that having a higher level of technician training is important and critical. And if I could just relate a really quick story. Years ago, you guys remember Fedco? Some of you from
Yes.
Southern California. When they closed, they did a retraining of the people that were obviously being let go. And I had a personal friend who went, she was a cashier at Fedco. She went to pharmacy technician training. She then went to work in a hospital, and she lasted 2 weeks. She quit because she could not take the stress of knowing that everything that she did was a life and death situation. Now, the reason I bring this story up is she went back to cashier at Home Depot, making more money than she was as a pharmacy tech. So again, I think that's another issue that we need to think about. If
Yes.
the responsibility is great, and
Oh, yeah.
and how society in general devalues pharmacy technicians from a salary standpoint is beyond me.
Thank you. Public comment. Good afternoon, Mark.
For the record, Mark Johnston representing CVS Health. Many of you know me as the former executive director of the Idaho board, and while I was there, I was elected to NABP's executive committee. And while I am not speaking on behalf of NABP today, as part of the executive committee, I've had the honor of serving on the ACE committee. So the ACE committee oversees all of the exams that NABP administers, like the last gentleman referred to, MPJE, NAPLEX. So I've worked personally with the psychometricians. There's 6 of them on staff at NABP. The number that NABP uses for each question to be psychometrically sound, to be written, created, and tested, and become a real question in the test is $20,000 a question. So when we talk
Mark?
about a psychometrically sound,
What did you say again?
$20,000 a question. So when we talk about a certification exam, I think you want a real exam, a psychometrically sound exam. And the exam doesn't exist today as I know it, except for PTCB and the ACCEPT test, which are both psychometrically sound tests. But if there's a test outside of those that we're talking about requiring that doesn't exist today, that is an enormous undertaking, or the test would not meet your standards, I believe. So I'd be glad to stand for any questions on how the testing process works at NABP. I've been a fairly integral part of it, but it's an enormous undertaking, and I just wanted to make that point.
I have a question for you. So, as putting your old hat on, as director, executive officer in Idaho, did you look at potentially creating a test for your? You guys did it differently. I think pretty much all technicians had the opportunity to move forward. You kind of grandfathered the ones who didn't meet the list. But did you consider that maybe part of that was to do a test?
So in order to perform the advanced duties that you're considering today, in Idaho, we started requiring PTCB certification. After a couple of years, we let the ACCEPT test into, so PTCB or the ACCEPT test. We also had 2,000 hours as an hour requirement. However, just this year, the Idaho board removed the hour requirement, so there's no longer any hour requirement in Idaho. But the PTCB and the ACCEPT test certification requirement still exists. But we didn't consider any other exam.
They didn't require an AA degree or any type of educational level.
No.
Advanced practice?
So we'll get to duties, and perhaps I'll come back up later. But many of these duties are allowed in many other states. Nobody has the AA requirement, but I'll save that for the duties. We're
So
not
in
to the
Idaho, I
duties
can
yet.
actually go and take the PTCB test and be advanced and check prescriptions.
Yes.
Yeah, and I
And
think
never
it's
have worked
actually-
in a pharmacy.
I guess if you get a study book and you can pass it without ever working
I've
in
talked to a number of
pharmacy,
techs that have done that. When I asked about experience, I've interviewed them and they say I have no experience, I just passed the test. Wow, okay.
I'd be remiss if I left the microphone without saying that I've really appreciated the process that has taken place to get here. The 4, I believe it is, licensing committee meetings that I've attended and had the ability to interact with the committee and to see the draft come to this form that it's in now. It's been really exhilarating as a former executive director of an administrative agency to see the process work. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Good afternoon.
Nikki Van Kirk, pharmacy technician. I work at a hospital and at a chain pharmacy currently. And in my perspective as tech check, the tech is good in certain cases. I feel that it should only be for refills because that way the pharmacist can check it originally against the patient's profile and history, make sure there is no interactions, because at least for mine, half of the evening is spent with us just doing refills for the following day. That way that would eliminate the pharmacist from having to do refills. Also, I am PTCP certified, and for that PTCP certified exam, I wouldn't feel comfortable if I just took that exam to do the other things that you're asking us that you would like us to do. So I believe that there should be some kind of standard exam. As a technician, if I want to do those tasks, I would expect that I would have to be able to prove that I can do them. And as the tech, from experience, we are so scared that we make sure and triple check everything. That way we don't mess up, because we know that that person's life is in our hands, because no one else is going to see this before it gets to the patient. Also, I agree that there should be some kind of internship in the actual activities that we're going to do, because I can say I already have 3,000 hours worth of experience. Doesn't mean I know how to do or how to properly take a prescription over the phone or one of the other activities you'd like us to do. So I think having an internship in the actual items that you want us to do would be extremely helpful for us from our point of view.
Thank you. Really good insight. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Danny.
Again, Danny Martinez with CPHA. First, I want to say CPHA completely supports CRA and lowering the minimum requirement hours. We think that is sound policy. We fully support that. Whether it's 1,500 or 2,000, I guess you guys will decide what's more appropriate. I did feel like I needed to come up though, because when the board's discussing whether a pharmacist's time would be when their time gets freed up to do more clinical outreach, to do more consultation, that's something that we at CPHA always tell our members to do. We always support and encourage them to do consultations. So if there's any sort of insinuation that by freeing up, their time that they're not going to consult, we take that personal, not personal, but you know what I mean. And so and having attended the last few licensing committees, I know the Drake study's been given to the licensing committee that actually gives data and evidence that when you free up the pharmacist's time, they do more consultations, they do more immunizations. I know there's people here who can speak specifics to the Drake study. This is a study that the licensing committee has read and depended on for some of the language that's in here. So I would urge you guys that this is in addition to minimizing to take the minimal hours lower than 3,000, because 3,000, my understanding that would be the highest in the nation. No other state has it. And as far as I understand, the average in terms of minimum hours is roughly 1,500 to 2,000 across the United States. In fact, and I'm told that that trend is actually going downward in terms of lowering the hours required for that reason. Now, we fully support pharmacy techs, and we'll absolutely agree that pharmacy techs are absolutely important in a lot of our community settings. Some of these pharmacies would not be able to operate without pharmacy techs. We don't want to scare them off by putting the bar so high to where they're going to say, you know what, this is not for me, it's not worth it, I'm gone. And in fact, I remember one of the board members who's not here right now who actively said, I would not encourage my children to do this if that was the requirement. It doesn't make economic sense for them. When you scare them away, it also affects the pharmacist. So I just want to make those comments.
What if we were to say 1,500 hours in general and an additional 500 hours in the specific area for the advanced practice?
Like an intern? You're saying like an intern?
Right.
I think what he's referring to is like an intern apprenticeship of some kind.
Right.
In terms of experience.
Right. So that they would have, let's say, a total of 2,000, but 1,500 would be just the general, and 500 would be in the advanced area.
They would have to submit like an intern, like a form that says that they got this experience from a pharmacist.
And because our pharmacy tech over there said, that she'd like to see that.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from her whether
So
she thought that's enough.
We could reduce the general
Yeah, you
number
think
of
yes?
hours.
Okay. Good idea, Greg. Thank you, Danny.
Can I make a brief comment? Lori Wamsley with Walgreens. So just to give you guys some perspective on what's happening in the other states, most of the states that have some of the advanced duties, they have additional training requirements that are built into them. They don't have another specific licensure type. But for example, in Idaho, any of the technicians that administer immunizations are required to complete an immunization administration course as well as a CPR certification course. And then most of the employers that are also doing that are utilizing a technician doing immunizations have additional company-specific training. In Iowa, that's also a requirement. In Arizona, it's also a requirement for the technician product validation. So those are typically built in. That doesn't necessarily have a specific hours requirement associated with it, but there is other training that goes along with it other than just the general pharmacy tech day-to-day work.
That's a really good point. I didn't see it in here either. We're planning on adding it later in terms of if they are an immunization technician, they would have the same requirements that a
Have to have the
pharmacist.
training anyway because
The
that's a
APHA
requirement.
training. Yeah.
And
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and most of the training program, I believe, for the immunizations is like an 8-hour class plus then another
I've taken it.
8 or
Like
10
20
hours or
hours,
something
yes.
like that that's done online, and that's just for the administration for the technicians.
It's a pretty stringent course too. It's really good.
It's a little bit boiled down from the APHA course. It's not as much focused on the clinical side because that's not what the technician's doing. It's more on the task of proper immunization technique.
Because the pharmacist would still review the clinical before the patient.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Got it.
Thank
So
you.
I wasn't. So I just a quick question. I wasn't aware that there was a specific technician. Who sponsors this technician? What is it, APHA?
No, it's Washington State University is the first program that's been out, and that's what I believe most of the companies are working with right now. They're working on a train the trainer program, but that's what everybody's used thus far.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon.
What'd you do this time?
Is the green light on down
There
there?
we
I
go.
don't think-
Okay. Dennis McAllister. First of all, speaking for myself, tongue in cheek, I'm not trying to offend anyone, but in terms of the training and the experience, what is good and what do you get? I think when I'm hearing the discussion, I hear a lot of boards say, you're kind of playing pin in the tail on the donkey with a blindfold. Where are good training programs? And in my career, I had a wonderful program when I started out, and it's been going on for 40 years. And the military and the VA have had technicians doing this the whole time. Everything you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it works just fine, and the veterans aren't dying in the military hospitals, and that's exaggeration. It works very well. You might want to look at their training programs as a model. it might be a place to start. Second, speaking as an Arizona board member and visiting a lot of boards, I think there's a lot of confusion that creates some hype in the profession using the words tech, check, tech. And it comes out of the late 80s, early 90s when ASHP pushed it, and techs were actually checking unit dose carts without a pharmacist and blah, blah, blah. And there was no barcoding, it was actually tech, check, tech. Yesterday in Arizona, the governor approved our rules, which we changed the name because we now have barcode validation. And we call the rules technology-assisted product validation. And if the pharmacist does all the input, does all the DUR, all the evaluation, and the counseling at the end, if a tech gets a green screen, for instance, on choosing the product, the pharmacist doesn't need to look at it. They can bottle it and package it. And that takes a lot of work off the pharmacist behind the counter because they're down over at the drive-thru or at the counter or talking on the phone. The tech says, you got to look at this, you got to look at this. We've taken that off their backs. If the permit holder has a correct system, not all do. But if they do, they can go that way now in Arizona.
But what's a correct system? I actually like that term, technology-assisted product verification.
Yeah.
What is the system they would have to have?
It's really got to have a PV1, PV2 check.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
So the pharmacist does the PV1 and the PV2 is done by the technician.
Yeah, and it's barcode validation. So if the product doesn't match what the pharmacist said, it freezes the system. Now, if the tech decides to be rogue, as a bank teller, you can't stop it. But if they're following procedure, it can't fail. And my company and some other states have been using this system for years, and we have virtually 100% accuracy in product validation because it works. And more information for the board to consider. So TAVP, we're calling it, was pitched yesterday in Texas. They'll have draft rules in February. Not all the way as you're talking about APT. And legislation is in place in Iowa and Wisconsin for the same thing. And as you already heard, Idaho, the center of all pharmacy things, chuckle, has already done that. So just information for the board to consider as you go through your deliberations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, so we've got the motion on the board from the committee. So all in favor of going with the licensing requirements as drafted from the committee, please raise your hand.
Carter's gone, but
Yeah, he's not here. All opposed? Okay, Victor, you want to make another motion? I would give it because it was your idea. So
Okay. I'd like to move that one of the requirements for being a advanced practice pharmacist technicians would take a uniform standardized examinations besides holding all the other 4 or 5
you're saying
requirements.
include these 4, but then add a pharmacy technician.
Add a standardized
So
examination.
if we add the exam, do you think we still need the associate's art degree and the bachelor's degree?
Actually, they could hold 2 or 3. I think rather than 2 and 3 together. Actually, you could be either 2 or 3. Either you have a AA or you could go through a experience program. That would be fair. Either or.
I think that's right now. It says they have to have an AA, a bachelor's, or have gone the program.
And also number 2, a certificate program. They should have 2 or 3 in order to make it easier for people to have access. That way we're not denying everybody and make it difficult and for everybody to go in. You could have a certificate program, or you could have an AA degree. You
So
could
some
have a
type of
bachelor
certification
degree, or
is
some
what you're
type
saying.
of a board approved
So you're saying
training program.
PTCB would be, or EXCPT would be equivalent to an AA or a bachelor's?
Either one of them. 2 or 3. Plus the hours, plus the exam. Actually, to be honest with you, 3,000 hours, they are not really that much for advanced practice technicians, because I've been in practice for 30 years, and I have seen many technicians coming through and out my pharmacy. Anybody who need really to work at least, to be honest, in my pharmacy, they have to work at least 2 years in my pharmacy before I really think that they are really capable of doing a lot of things. Anybody who has only worked 1 year, they are not qualified. If they are, if they are not, either one is fine. I think either one is fine, but at least a minimum of 3,000 hours should be a working experience in a pharmacy.
I think Greg's point was a good one, which says that, and I think the technician said it as well, if you're just working in non-advanced practice duties, you haven't kind of interned in it or done work in that, so then you're just jumped and put into this position.
Speak.
You want to keep 3,000, but maybe designate 500 of that as in the area of the advanced practice duties.
500 is only like about what?
Jenny has
10
something to
weeks.
say.
10 weeks.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Well, I think you need to finish the discussion, but I will say that from the enforcement perspective, how are we going to know when someone's earning the hours as a pharmacy technician to become certified versus just unlicensed activity performing the duties of a certified clerk? Unless there's a registration, which complicates everything.
Okay.
Couldn't they just do like the interns did, where you had like an intern form that was signed by a pharmacist attesting to the fact that they've had this training?
Well, part of the reason we don't do that anymore is that we'd have people stand and initial it right outside the door of the board's office in order to get them people licensed. And
I thought we didn't
lost
do it
its
because the
value.
schools were arguing that they got that kind of training during school.
What the real reason was is that there was no way we could enforce it, because if you signed it, all we required was that there be a signature and knowledge, but we couldn't
Boy, and I
enforce
got
it.
all those.
You did that
real
work for nothing,
training.
Amy. I'm sorry. You were duped.
Well, I mean, maybe if the standardized exam is, adequate in order to answer it, they'd have to have had that kind of experience anyway.
I think the board needs to decide if it wants to have some level of experience as an advanced practice tech as a condition before licensure. If that's the case, then we'll have to figure out a way to figure out how they're going to get that experience. But I think the first question is whether or not you want them to have that experience.
So, Victor, your motion is that either number 2 or number 3? That
Plus a standardized exam.
So 2 or 3 meaning, just so
well,
I think
two,
Robert's right. Is it all of them? Do they have to have like one of a text?
Well, I mean, I kind of prefer they have an A degree in pharmacy technology than one of those programs. Those programs, we don't know what kind of quality program they have. If they have the technician program they have now, that I'm not so sure. I would prefer they at least as A degree in pharmacy technology. That would make me feel a little more comfortable.
So do we need the board approved program if we've got the test? If we have an exam at the back end, do we need them to go through a board approved training program?
I agree with you. I think if you're going down that road, do we even need number 3? Bless you.
Yeah. Do we need
So
the
maybe
training?
instead of number 3, you just do the test.
So they can have a PTCB, they can have an AA or a bachelor's. Is that what you're saying?
So if they don't have a
I think, yeah, 2
PTCB,
or
they could get a
3.
board approved program.
Test.
Either way.
You have to have one, then you can have 2 or 3, and then you take the test, and you
Yeah.
have the 3,000 hours.
I agree.
But now the only
education.
thing of just kind of thinking a little bit
Well, you have to
further
graduate
down,
from a school of pharmacy,
we
yeah.
do make a requirement of being an advanced practice tech is that you maintain a PTCB and the CE associated with it. So that's the only, just kind
That's
of
a good
thinking
point.
a little bit ahead.
That's a good point.
Okay, so do you know how to?
But then some of the technician actually they didn't get the degree, or they didn't get the training from this PTCB. You have other schools that gave them a 9-month program.
Right. I mean, the way we have it written now, you have to have a PTCB and you have to have an AA's degree. And then
Just
to
put
renew
or
in a
instead
couple
of
years,
and.
you have to maintain your PTCB.
I think what Debbie's saying, Victor, is that on one of our requirements, the renewal requirement, the next one we're going to vote on, is that they have to maintain their certification as PTCB.
And I think we don't want to lose that because that's something that's out there. It's kind of a standard, that we can kind of hold on to and that CE's easy. I guess I'm trying to think, okay, let's say we go with this test. What are we testing that's different and that's already been covered? Say right now they have to have the PTCB and they have to get a degree or go through a training program. What else are we testing? Because it's these are non-clinical functions, so we're testing the math. Okay, that's already taken care of in the PTCB and probably either the AA or the training program. We're testing drug name. Okay, well that's already been covered in both of them. We're testing. I'm just trying to figure out what are we testing that hasn't already been tested.
The ability to take a prescription over the phone.
Well, I think that would
That's why I said we have to
that
talk
would be
about
in
the
the approved
description
training
first.
program or potentially in the AA's degree. Maybe we need to ask the Cerritos College, but I think that they talk about prescriptions and what are supposed to be in there. So I'm not sure that the test gets us anything that we're already making them do PTCB, so that's a test. And I understand what you're saying, Amy. I agree with you. But if we make them also do an AA's, I think the way we have it here, we're better off than just adding another test on, because I think we've tested them. Well, I think we've tested all that. I don't know if I would love for someone who teaches technicians today to come up and tell me. I'm sorry, I'm not really staring at you, but I am. Aren't we already testing all? We're worried about taking prescriptions over the phone. We're worried about. Aren't we already testing that?
We've already heard from a technician and somebody from a school.
Well, we heard from a college of pharmacy. I'd like to hear from someone who teaches technicians.
Says we should have it.
He doesn't teach technicians.
Okay, but the technician said we should have it.
So
I would like to hear from the school.
Good afternoon.
Karen with Cerritos College. To your point, so the concern I brought to the committee a few meetings ago was more regarding English, math, and basics. So if you take out education, we all know we've worked with pharmacy technicians that have only their high school diploma and aren't really up to par with the bare minimum. So we pretty much agreed that we do need to have the bare minimum. So to see this go away makes me as a pharmacist very nervous because
see what go away? Just
bare minimum education.
You mean the AA or the bachelor's?
Minimum of AA,
okay.
Correct.
So you think they should have an AA or bachelor's?
I do. And I've worked with pharmacy technicians just like you said, have sat down, taken the test and didn't have any experience. And you can give them experience. But what happens with them starting to type prescriptions that are very complicated? Some can't spell very well, and so there's that issue that I would like to see the educational part not go away.
In your AA's degree, you teach that and you test for that.
Yes, and so we do have. Because we are ASHP accredited, we're required to give an exit exam, which is very similar to the PTCB, and it is preparation for the PTCB. So as California stands now, they're not required to take the PTCB to be licensed because they can graduate from our program and be licensed. However, we encourage all our students to take one of the national examinations because we do know that employers, in essence, favor that because there is a minimum standard. Now, in terms
easier to get a tech license too.
Right, but they can get it by just completing the program. So now, to answer your question, Debbie, regarding whether they need to have a standardized test, perhaps for APT, if the board puts in wording in there where they've, let's say, graduated from an AA degree or a program that is already standardized, because you have so many programs out there that might not be so standardized. I know for a fact that at Cerritos, they're tested because we have to, according to ASHP, give the exit exam. So there's that end result that they all have to have tested through to be done. So I'm confident with Cerritos College or any other ASHP accredited program. I can't speak for the ones that are not. And that's where I think this is going, trying to standardize it. So if you ask me as a pharmacist, I would like to see some sort of a standard. Now, should it be that difficult and should it be that impossible? I don't think so. If we can make it very basic, and maybe put wording there if they graduate from a board approved, because we did put the wording last time with the board approved program, right? So board approved program, perhaps in there is a note saying that they've had an exit exam through the program, then maybe they don't have to take the standardized test. Again, up to the board to decide. Or else if they didn't go through that kind of program with that standardized test at the end, maybe they should take some sort of a standardized test.
So in your AA's degree, do they have a standardized test at the end?
Yes, they have an exit exam. ASHP requires that no one should graduate from our program and receive an ASHP accredited certificate, because we have to give them a certificate, without the exit exam. And that exit exam actually comes in the externship class, the experiential class, after they finish their hospital 200 hours. So they not only learn didactic, but they really need to finish their 200 hours, 120 hours in a community, that's fine. But the 200 hours in the hospital, and in that class, at the end of that, their final exam is the exit exam.
But these are people that you have selected to be enrolled in your program. So they're probably, I would argue, probably the upper crust of people that are going to be pharmacy techs because they qualify to be accepted. So is this really indicative of the whole technician population?
So we're community college, so we really have a hard time with the acceptance program because you have to offer it to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So we do need to go by the ASHP accreditation in terms of fitting in the courses. That being said, it's an open enrollment. They can go in, so I can't tell them you can't come in, but they need to pass all the tests to be able to get to that stage where they take
and see the value of an education and
Exactly.
going to community college.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Which goes to Albert's point.
Exactly. So
Good point.
yes, I really, really enjoy working with great pharmacy technicians, and I want to see that. So I really like the discussion here today. Thank you.
Now, how many accredited ASHP accredited schools are there in California? Do you know?
So there is a list. I provided the board with a list a couple of months ago. There's lots. The list is available online, and I printed it all. The community colleges, though, that offer it at basically no cost. We have the AA degree is offered at Santa Ana College, in Cerritos College, in Foothill out in San Jose.
Right.
San Jose, yeah. But again, as the board puts in things like that in writing, as it encourages more community colleges to open up these programs, and they are looking to, there are funding through the state to open up more and more of these programs. However, there's going to need to be some sort of a need in the field for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so Victor, you want to continue with your motion?
Yeah, well, so you want to keep 1, 2, 3, 4 plus the exam. Is that right, Albert? Okay, so that's my motion.
Second? Greg. He's saying keep 4211 as stated, plus add the exam, the board approved exam at the end.
Okay. So someone's saying, I still have a question. So based on her testimony, what is the exam doing that they aren't already being examined about?
But Debbie, it was just like everybody went to different school of pharmacy. You have final exams at each of the school of pharmacy. So what is our board CPJE is testing what you didn't get tested at your school of pharmacy. I mean, you got different variations from different pharmacy school. So all we need to know is we have something that we test the minimum competency of the pharmacist level in California, just like the advanced practice technicians.
But when you leave pharmacy school, you don't take one final exam that wraps up your whole pharmacy school. That's what CPJE and NAPLEX does. In their situation, they do take an exam at the end of their school that wraps it all up. So they take this exam,
So this would
and
do
then they
what
take
do.
it, and then they come and take another exam. I mean,
Problem passing.
they've already taken the cumulative exam. Pharmacists don't do that. They've already taken the cumulative exam. So what are we examining again? We're just making them take another
You're
test.
examining the same thing they do in their wrap-up exam.
But why would we do that if they already did a wrap-up exam? Once again, pharmacy, we
They
don't do
did
that.
it, but not all the schools do it.
But we don't know what kind of level of exam they have. They all varies. So yeah, at least the standardized. At least we know minimum how much they know.
But we could say, as part of our board approved, we could set the bar that's one of the, just like we did with APP. We said that they had to have a cumulative exam. So what we would approve, what would be okay is they have to have the wrap-up exam, and whether it's be ASHP or whatever, if they've already taken the
But this way
exam.
we can control what that wrap-up exam is.
But there
Well,
are
just
many
like
law
with the
schools in
APP, we don't
California
have-
too, like the SMJ. There are many law schools in California, and they test everything that they could have tested at the bar examination, right? But how come you have different people passing the bar as opposed to the final exam at the school of
At
law?
the end of law
You didn't
school.
standardize law examinations,
Let's
right?
just
But
take a
Victor,
vote.
at the end of law school, you don't have a cumulative
Call for the
exam.
vote.
At
Oh.
the end of accounting school, you don't have a cumulative exam. At the end of technician school, you have a cumulative exam.
Okay, so before we call for the vote, is there any public comment? Did you want to step up?
Nikki Van Kirk, technician. So before I went to the associate's program, I actually went to a private one that only took me 3 months to take, and that allowed me just enough to pass the PTCB. And unfortunately, they did give me an externship, but when I got into the externship, even though I took that exam that they had, I knew just enough to not pretty much burn the pharmacy to the ground. So I would agree that they need to have an associate's degree because there are many programs out there that are cheap just to get you enough to pass to become a technician. This would ensure that everyone would at least be able to do the basics without having to worry about little things, that they actually would know at least the common drugs you see every day, because I work with ones I went to school with who didn't go back to school and they still don't know their basic drugs and generics, where the associates requires that you would know the minimums just to be able to function fully in that program. So I would strongly suggest the associates in that or the bachelor's in that versus just.
But so after your associates, our requirement number 3 is you have an associate's degree or you go through a training program that we'll approve. Do you feel like you would still need an exam after you've taken your cumulative exam at your?
Absolutely, because
So even though you just took the exam for your AA degree,
Yes.
you want to take a second exam?
Yes, because the 2 exams don't cover the same information.
No, they would. Because the AA degree is a cumulative exam of what you studied the whole time,
Correct.
and that's what we would test you on too.
But you want us to take prescriptions and give immunizations in different categories, so we don't. Right now, we're not studying how to do the specific pharmacy tasks. So I think it should
Nikki, we really appreciate your input. Thank you for being the voice of the pharmacy tech.
Yes, absolutely.
It's great. I want to congratulate you, and I hope that you become an advanced pharmacy tech.
I hope so if it comes through.
She will.
I think she'll be a pharmacist.
So I do think there needs to be a different exam.
Greg seconded it. I'm sorry.
I see.
Go ahead, Nikki. Sorry.
So I think there needs to be a separate test that covers what you want us to do as an advanced technician. Because I understand that they're probably going to cover similar stuff, but it probably just needs to be specific just to the advanced areas that you want us to cover. It doesn't have to be the whole, because the PTCB already covered that.
Maybe the law, so that you know what you can and can't do.
Or the drug interactions.
Thank you. Not done yet. Hi, Angie.
Want to briefly get on record with the motion that's on the table, adding the additional test. Our association would be opposed to that measure, and I think part of that is because in some of the prior recommendations that we had believed that under the umbrella of a board certified training program, some of these training programs do have testing requirements, just as even the representative from El Cerrito had mentioned. With ASHP accreditation, we had offered that APTs go through ASHP accredited programs in order to acquire licensure. So, I mean, looking at the language, obviously that part needs to be fleshed out a little bit more as to what standards and what programs the board is going to recognize. But we do believe that the board will be able to do so without having to, will be able to recognize these programs that have cumulative tests already without having to create another one. So I just wanted to offer that. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's only one member gone. You're okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, Danny.
Hi. We would also oppose that, along with CRA, that adding and I'm just trying to understand here. My understanding, perhaps people who are smarter than I am in this area can help me out. As a requirement for the licensing, you have to have an active pharmacy license or pharmacy tech license, in which you have to take a PTCP or an examination already, which covers exactly what the wrap-up AA program would already entail. If that's what I'm understanding, what you were saying earlier, Debbie, that to me it sounds almost redundant to take this examination, because as somebody who's already licensed as a pharmacy tech who has to take an examination for PTCB and accept, has to take that, and then should they choose the route to go for an AA degree, take another exam that does exactly the same thing, and then the board is asking for a third exam, all testing the same thing. So I'm confused in that, and I'm sharing kind of Debbie's concern on this, because I don't understand what we're testing pharmacy techs at this point on what I would count as.
There's so much variability in the programs, and we heard it from the technician that was up here. She went through 2 programs; they were both different. I think the assurance is that these individuals that will be front facing to the public in our public protection role, we want to ensure that they're competent and at least testing them.
Understand.
Now, I would be fine with getting rid of the PTCB requirement, but I think the only reason we're including it, I think, is because of the fact of the continuing education requirements of being keeping up. I mean, if we want to do CE besides that, we can take out the PTCB. I mean, that's the only value I really see in it.
So again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. As somebody who represents the Association for Pharmacists, we absolutely value pharmacy techs. This is one example of where we think this is going to scare them away. While some people may enjoy taking exams, and God bless those people, because I certainly didn't. I just think this is beyond redundant at this point to add an additional examination once this pharmacy tech, or this proposed advanced pharmacy tech, already has taken examinations through the course of their licensure. So it's not that we don't want them to be capable or not capable, or we obviously want them to be. We were happy to have the board approved program language in there to address that. We fully believe that the board can approve programs that test for competency in this field. We just think that this, aside from, let's be honest, an additional test would probably be an additional cost for students, and how much are they drowning in debt already at this point? So I end my comments with that, and if you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to.
Well, we talk about consumer safety. I mean, you talk about life and death, and different programs have different level of different way of educate them. But the standardized test, but make sure that they have enough knowledge to carry on the duty. So, like I say, it's life and death is important to us.
I think, though, these are non-judgmental tasks they're doing. So they're not making life and death decisions.
When you talk about taking a new prescription order, when they make one mistake on the order, that could be a life and death.
I think a pharmacist is still responsible for the DUR and the review of that prescription. If it's a new prescription, the pharmacist still has to look at it and still has to say, that drug, that dose, that way to take it. That's a technician doesn't give it to the pharmacist. The pharmacist say, oh, okay, that's what the technician said. Boom. The pharmacist is still clinical, making all the judgment calls. These are the non-judgmental tasks that these people are doing.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Mark.
Thank you again. I just wanted to speak to the economics of the test as I understand it. So the average data bank for a test at NABP is 1,500 questions. And they believe they have to keep that number in order to have the integrity of the test and to keep it psychometric, because psychometrically sound. Otherwise, you'd be giving the same questions over and over again, and somebody would be able to tabulate those and start creating their own data bank and jeopardize the integrity of the test. So somebody to create a test that has roughly 1,500 questions at the exorbitant rate that I mentioned earlier, in order for them to make their money back, because we're talking about a third party here, I believe, who's got to make some profit in this, or maybe there would be a university who would do a nonprofit, but they at least have to get their costs back. The cost of the exam, the the pharmacy boards, I believe, now are up to what, $500, $600, $700. I think that cost of the exam we're talking about would have to be more than that, because we're talking about creating a test from scratch, not one that's had questions in the data bank for 40 years. So how many technicians? First of all, I don't think anybody would create the test. Second of all, I don't think the technicians would be able to afford the test. And so I think this testing requirement really eliminates everything that we're talking about today. It really kills the proposal, and I truly do believe that. I think if Ryan was here, he would understand the economics of it based on the one meeting that we went through. But I, really believe that this one component would undo, the good that the licensing committee's done for the last 4 meetings.
Thanks.
I think that's a strong argument.
Can you address it, Jenny, what the cost, is this going to be a large cost?
Well, there's a Cadillac or Rolls Royce version, and then there's a lesser expensive model. In our case, we do the CPJE right now. The test questions, if they're compromised, we're going to charge you $20,000. But the reality is that in the case where you're looking at a practical exam, you could have one set of questions that test nomenclature, whether or not, and you just change the nomenclature. I can't imagine NAPLEX is using 40-year-old questions that have been in the bank for 40 years, because one of the things that we do is we spend a lot of time generating new questions. We have our own exam committee. We're able to develop the exam. If that's what the board wants us to do, we could establish our own exam committee and develop test questions. We would be required under Section 125 or 139 to validate the exam on a population that's appropriate for it. We would be required to do that. I don't think that we're talking about an exam that has the caliber of a pharmacist's exam. It could be lesser, and they would be tied directly to the skills and knowledge that we already set out that we expect for these people. So I completely disagree with your assessment that it's going to cost an exam that's going to have a price tag of $700. If only 20 people take it, maybe. But I think this is also the cost of doing business for the board, and we will have to assess that fee at some point down the road. But at the front end, I disagree that it would be that expensive, because we are not testing at the caliber that we would for a pharmacist.
And I think even with CPJ and NAPLEX, we don't have matching pass rates.
No, we don't. We have
two.
completely different, and in part because we've got a very defined scope for our exam.
And we cannot jeopardize the consumer safety based on the cost.
But as I sit here today, I can't tell you how much that would cost. We can do some estimates a little bit if that's important to the board, if that's where you want to go. But
thank you. Oh, sorry.
Can I just ask one clarifying question? So would this be a board exam, or would this be a third-party exam? I guess I'm confused just a little.
Well, from what I'm hearing from the comments, no one but California is even considering such an exam. So in which case I'm hearing California exam.
I like the CPJ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but we maybe would want to lease it to other states. Maybe we could turn down ABP.
So traditionally, all exams, as I think Ms. Harold mentioned, all the exams are tied to the duties. I mean, you start with the occupational analysis. So the scope of practice, or the area of practice of the occupation that you're licensing, would define the nature of the exam. So that other piece of what does the advanced practice pharmacy tech do, advanced pharmacy tech, that's going to help determine any exam in order for it to be psychometrically sound.
But you hire a consultant that sits in the room because it's part of that vendor's job to defend the exam if something goes haywire with it.
Right, and
you would be crazy not to do that.
That's how you meet those standards in 139.
Right, thank you.
I'm not familiar with 139. 139 requires a psychometrically sound exam.
Right.
So we are talking about
that's based on a job analysis that's conducted at least every 5 years. And so that would be part of the cost of whatever we would have to do if that's where the board decides to go. They're also given that there are 3 routes of entry into this. If there is a test at the end of the ASHP approved program, the board could determine to take that test. But for those with BS degrees or BA degrees, or those who have a board approved program, the board would have to determine how it wants to test those 2 components, because I don't necessarily see it as the same thing. So
thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi. Megan Page with California Society of Health System Pharmacists. I just want to applaud you guys for looking at this effort in advancing pharmacy technicians and the rules with this new licensure. CSHP does not have specified positions on each of these specific requirements. However, as long as they are sufficient to see and determine the competency that the technician has to fill these specified prescribed tasks, we're good with that. Thank you.
A comment regarding regarding the test, if that's something that the board would like to do. Hopefully, maybe my suggestion will maybe help Debbie a little bit with clarifying. So I do see Debbie's point. So PTCB is to standardize the pharmacy technician, PTCB or the accept to standardize the pharmacy technician's entry level. However, if the board would like to do or perform some sort of a test for APT, I think it should be APT specific. And therefore, yeah, we've already established that they're pharmacy technicians, that everybody is. But if you want to have the advanced, so now how are you going to do it? There should be some sort of maybe study, or maybe in the pharmacy while they're working doing their 3,000 hours, there should be some sort of allowance for them to learn how to do it. I worked with in the past with Long's drugstores, and we had a very structured program, in-house program that I was responsible for. We had a simulated lab that would take the pharmacy ancillaries into the simulated lab, show them how to do the tech duties in the simulated lab. But we had the leisure, the luxury to do that. But that's just an example where somebody can do some sort of an in-house training for the APT duties, along with the certification of the immunization. I mean, all this will come, of course, along with that. But the little things such as taking new prescriptions, which are super important, but they need to know how to do it. So the testing, just the standard PTCB test and taking another test, I have to agree with Debbie that the PTCB is already there. Why should we give the same? But if it's a
These are different
one,
duties, right? I mean, we're going to be
exactly
the PTCB's entry level pharm tech.
Absolutely.
This would be more. What you're saying is it should be more directed at the advanced pharmacy tech
Absolutely.
role.
And I think
Okay.
that in
That
that
makes
case,
sense.
I'm supportive of having some test of their competency, whether it's a test or it's going to be really hard to have anybody sign off for them. So if they're taking a course, that's again something else. But I don't know that you can get everybody in Eureka or remote areas to go and take a course. That's going to be tough. But to take a test maybe on a computer that's available in a testing center might work. But they do need to learn though how to do it. So we're going to need to think a little bit about that and enable that pharmacist, preceptor, give some sort of hours on the job. If an inspector comes in and they're doing these duties, there should be some maybe internal documentation, maybe on a self-assessment or something that they do have an APT in training and who it is. I'm not sure, just an idea, throwing it out there. I mean, we trust our pharmacists and our pharmacy manager to do the right thing, and that's one thing that they can do. A lot of our preceptors are so passionate about teaching their pharmacy technicians and train them, and that's one thing that they can definitely do in there. And then maybe we could do a 20-minute, half an hour test. It doesn't have to be so cumbersome. They're already taken the PTCB, but on the duties that are really
Right.
specific for APT. So that's what I think is a good idea, and I think that's where Victor probably is going with that.
Thank you. Nikki, you have some more comments?
So I know the issue is the actual test that's for just the AP advanced pharmacy tech. I used to do nursing assistant. If you all felt comfortable, it could be a practicum, like a practical exam. That way you have a pharmacist witness, or there could be done here or at a different location where they can actually fill a prescription taken from the phone and simulate each task in front of you. That way you would know that they are able to attempt and do those actual activities versus an actual, like a handwritten test, more of a hands-on test that you can prove that they're able to do those actual tasks that you require.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion. We have a second by Greg. All in favor? Oh yeah, can you repeat
Please,
your
yeah.
motion, Victor?
The motion is to add one condition to the proposed BCP 4211, the licensing requirement for the ADP, add the standardized examinations for the other licensees.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Wolf.
You just committee recommendation. Third one: propose a statutory change to establish the renewal requirements.
Could we maybe take a break?
Oh, you want it? Okay, let's take a break. Let's see. It's 3:00. Let's start back up at 3:15. Get started. Okay, so the next motion from the committee was to pursue a statutory change to establish the renewal requirements for advanced pharmacy technician, and that's proposed BPC 4234 in terms of CE renewal requirement. That was a committee's motion that basically says an advanced pharmacy technician shall complete 20 hours of CE each renewal cycle. A licensee must also maintain certification as specified in 4211A2. Now, what is required for CE for PTCB or EXCPT? So is it kind of redundant to say you have to be PTCB or EXCPT and the 20 hours?
Can that be either or? Can that be either or? Either you take the 20 hours so you maintain your PTCB like certifications.
What do you guys think?
Well, I think we wanted them to maintain the PTCB. And so maybe we just say they maintain the PTCB, but then that's 20 hours. I think the only thing, Jenny, can we then say what we want the 20 hours to be? Or do we need
You could put in a specific requirement that 2 hours of CE shall be earned at least every so many years in a particular area, if that's what you like to do. But then again, you know, if they're going to have to keep the 20 hours for their renewal.
What's the renewal cost for the PTCB? Because if they're checking the CE anyway, what do you? There's a cost to renew PTCB.
Well, I think we want them to stay with the PT. I mean, for us, it'll be easy, because if they're, as long as their PTCB stays active, then we know that they've done their 20 hours.
We've been known to do an audit or two on CE, so we might do that once in a while.
Nikki's got some information for us.
I just renewed my PTCB last week. It's 20 hours of continuing education, 1 in law, 1 in patient safety, and it's $40.
$40. That's not bad.
And actually, that's good because those are kind of the two things we wanted to. Yeah.
I do. Like
And that's PTCB. What about EXCPT? Do they have the same? Is it about the same?
I don't think there's anybody here from.
Because I don't think we can just say PTCB, right?
Right,
Don't we
yeah.
have to say each?
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you want, I can Google it.
So I don't see the fee here, but it's 20 hours of CE, at least 1 hour in pharmacy law, and 1 hour in patient safety.
Same thing.
It's probably pretty competitively priced then.
Yeah, I would think it's.
Okay, any other further board discussion on the committee's motion? Otherwise, I'll open it for public comment. Public comment on the renewal requirements? Okay, all in favor of the committee's motion? Okay. Now, just in regards to having the separate licensures of inpatient or hospital or community ambulatory care pharmacy, we just wanted to give the staff some guidance on writing this. Alan, did you have a comment?
Well, I think we should definitely have that difference between the two because their duties are really non-comparison. Should it be a motion or what should we do?
Do we need a motion, Ann?
So I think if you want to create a second license type, I would say that it might be better to kind of memorialize that a little bit, to direct staff to maybe create a separate license type if that's what the will of the board is.
Okay, so I move to have a separate license or a separate registration type for the advanced pharmacy technician for hospital and community.
Second.
Second. And I think the duties will be different when we talk about the duties of what they'll do. It'll be very different.
I would say though that we would, just for simplicity, even though I didn't agree with our last licensing vote, but we would make the licensing a similar sort of process.
Right, but the duties will be different. I mean, the duties that they'll
I'm
be able
agreeing
to
with you.
do.
I'm just saying the licensing requirements would be the same.
Any public comment? What's CSHP's stand on this? No? CPHA okay with this?
Quick before they get one.
I need to take that back to CPHA. Generally speaking, I guess I'm a little. I need to know. I'm not familiar with the difference in duties between the two. I just would need to get more.
They would be doing, like in a hospital, they might be checking crash carts. They might be sterile compounding. There would be other types of things that they may be able to do without, and that still needs to be explored.
I think the concern I would have, I guess unofficially, and this is unofficially, is that is kind of the same to what I've been saying. Is that any barriers to make this harder to if you're having to have a separate license for different settings, does it make it harder to actually become an APT? I would think we'd have concerns with that, but again, that's unofficial without having checked with CPHA's leadership.
Thank you. And I would envision if it was a hospital, we could even ask some sterile compounding questions on our exam. So, because that's what you would do in a hospital. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? We just took a vote. Are you in favor or opposed? In favor. Okay, unanimous. All right, you get what you need, Ann? Okay, item B, discussion and consideration of the duties an APT may perform in a traditional community pharmacy setting. As part of the development of the APT provisions, the committee discussed the scope of practice of an individual granted license as an APT. The committee discussed the duties currently authorized by law and then looked at and noted that all such non-discretionary duties must be completed under the direct supervision and control of a pharmacist. The committee reviewed a proposal to establish the scope of practice for an APT in the community ambulatory care setting. They also reviewed various articles related to the topic, including one accepting verbal prescriptions and prescription transfers as well. Oh, there's prescription transfers too, Albert, not just verbal. Transferring prescriptions they would do. As well as the outcomes of a Drake University study regarding a Tech program in community pharmacies. After discussion and hearing public comments, the committee voted to pursue a statutory change to establish duties that an APT may perform in a community and ambulatory care pharmacy. So the focus was mainly on the pharmacy, on the outpatient side. Number one is verify the accuracy of a type prescription label and ensure the label accurately reflects the container's contents for a drug order. 2. Accept new orders and seek clarification on prescriptions from a prescriber's office as specified, including inquiring about the intended purpose or indication for prescribed medication. 3. Inquire about the intended purpose or indication of the medication from the prescriber's office. 4. Transfer prescriptions. 5. Receive a transferred prescription. 6. Perform the technical task of vaccine administration. And 7. Compile medication lists. Question. So let's, Victor.
On number 2, I would have an issue with accepting new prescription from a prescriber. I think if the doctor calling the prescription, the pharmacist should answer the phone and receive the new order. If it's just refills, that would be okay. Because, I mean, you're talking about, even though there's advanced practice technicians with only 3,000 hours, they couldn't have learned all the name of the prescriptions, and a lot of names are similar because they wouldn't know exactly what the dosage for those. Even if the physicians said something different, we would know exactly what is right, what is wrong, but even advanced practice technician would not be able to do that. So I have issue with that one.
I had a concern on seek clarification on prescriptions. What does that really mean? Because it could be a situation where I have a prescription and you have renal dysfunction. Am I going to call and clarify what dose I should be given in your renal? I think that should be a pharmacist who requires clarification.
Well, what happens sometimes today is, you're clarifying the directions, and so like the technician calls, gets on hold, waits for the doctor, says, so is it 1 twice a day? Yes. Okay, just a minute, let me get my pharmacist. It's clarifications around.
But what type of because I don't think this says that. The clarifications to me is a really broad term.
So as specified, I was thinking when we talked about this a couple meetings ago that that somehow Laura got into, like, obviously there's pharmacist clinical judgment involved, or you remember why we added that as specified, because obviously there's certain times when the pharmacist would call themselves.
So the actual language is in the attachment. What's in the chair report is a summary of it.
Sorry, I didn't scroll down.
So it's verify the accuracy of a typed, let's see, for accept new or seek clarification about a prescription from a prescriber's office unless the prescription requires the professional judgment of a pharmacist.
So who's going to make that call, though, is the question. Unless it requires a professional judgment of a pharmacist. If the pharmacist doesn't know about it, that means the technician's going to determine that?
Yes. And that happens today. Like, when a technician's at the window talking to a customer, and there's a question, the technician has to make a decision. Is this a clinical question I need to call the pharmacist over, or is this a question I can answer? So, I think the technicians can make this decision. And then I think also accepting a new prescription, I thought that was actually one of the reasons why we're having the test, is because, I asked you, Victor, why the test? You wanted to make sure that they could take prescriptions. So I think if we're going to have the test, I think you want to do the test because you're trying to put the bar a little higher. Then let's give them the ability to operate at that little bit higher level. Once again, the pharmacist is still responsible. The pharmacist is still has to review that order. So it's not like that's getting anywhere without the pharmacist seeing what was ordered, the medication, the quantity, the strength, the dosage. The pharmacist still has to check all that stuff. And if something's not right, then the pharmacist would probably make a call to go and verify it. But yes.
I was just going to add, number 3 was put in there specifically that you inquire about
The indication.
on my. Oh, sorry. The intended purpose of the medication
Right. Otherwise you
was
cannot
provided
check.
to help
Yeah.
guide that, to make sure that you could
Yeah.
further identify
Otherwise
the
you
drug.
cannot check. Yeah. Otherwise the pharmacists are no way of checking.
So what do the other board members think about this?
Did you remove the control substance from those lists? I think last committee meeting, the control substance was
At
on
the committee meeting,
Schedule
we
2.
voted. At the committee meeting, we voted to not have controlled substance,
Okay.
but we know
They
that
remove- They remove it. Okay.
I know that you want it, and so I think we said, Albert, you talk to the rest of the board
You're right.
about it.
I think it was handing out the control substance.
No, able to take control
Oh,
C2 order.
Oh, okay.
Able to accept C2 order. That was
That's
our
actually a really
objective.
good point. Yeah. I understood it as handing out at the window. Okay.
Well, there was 2 parts to it. There was being able to take a controlled substance, and it was any controlled 2 through 5. And then as part of that, the pharmacist would hand out all prescriptions, all new prescriptions, and all controlled drugs, new or refill. And I think at our last committee meeting, we said the tech could take controlled substances because the pharmacist is doing the DUR. But that we would discuss it, and it passed the committee, but we would discuss it again at this board meeting.
So what you're saying, Albert, if we understand correctly, is you're saying you want the pharmacist to actually take phone orders for controlled substances, new orders. Okay. Other board members?
Once again, the committee didn't think that was necessary because I think part of the reason, Albert, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think
the reason I said that, as all of us doing the disciplinary cases, almost 70% of those is narcotic diversion, and now you give more opportunity for them to call in phony prescription. So I don't think we should allow them to do that. Period.
I don't know. It's not like they're prescribing it, and it's not like they're going to be taking it for themselves. I mean, that's a different issue. But taking the order over the phone, you know, if it happens to be for hydrocodone or something like that.
Oh, Schedule 2, you cannot call in.
Right, you can't. Okay, so scheduled. So let's say tramadol. Okay, something like tramadol. What difference does it make if it's tramadol or if it's you know, some kind of antibiotic as far as the person, you know, receiving the order over the phone?
Maybe we need to discuss whether we want them to do new orders, because that would then we can talk about the controlled substance. So I think, Victor, you raised an issue about new orders.
Yeah, I would
I
totally.
could see the problem, you know, when things sound similar and it's a new order. Like you don't want to give Flomax to somebody that's looking for Flonase. Yeah, but
that could happen because you only have that person, the technicians, been only working 1.5 years. Now, how many medications would he or she know in that 1.5 years, as opposed to the pharmacist?
So on a new situation, I could see that being
Right, and I'll be the one responsible for her, you know, getting the wrong prescription over the phone. There's no way I would know that if that's correct or not, because I cannot verify with the doctor.
Well, one thing I'm against for technician to accept new prescription is that I think nowadays, because Medicare require all the prescriber to e-prescribe, so you see very, very, very little prescription being phoned in. It's all e-prescribing now, or computers send. And for a PIC to accept responsibility to lose his or her license without able to verify a prescription, whether it's accurate or inaccurate, I think is not fair for the PIC. And some might say, well, PIC have the right to deny or refuse to have the technician to take order. But you know damn well the PIC is under pressure from the company that they work, that they have to allow them to do so. So I mean, as a pharmacist, I am not comfortable if I'm responsible for somebody's action, unless I'm not liable. If I'm liable, I make sure that's a way for me to verify, to check it, make sure the accuracy is correct.
Well, I think part of the advanced pharmacy tech is that there is some liability now attached to that individual. But I'm surprised. So in your setting, you would
Is that true though?
Yes,
I want to make sure we
that
clarify that. Is that true?
Yes, that was part of the.
Because I thought they're working under the PIC.
As it's currently structured, they're still working under the PIC's supervision, but there's going to be some, or there can be some shared responsibility based on the more duties that you're giving them and the more independence.
So they would lose their license essentially, just like that would be what their level of accountability would be. We could revoke their license.
Just like you take,
Got it.
Now, it might not be 50-50. We might say the advanced practice technician was 20% responsible and the PIC was 80% responsible. But when we originally started working on this, it was one of the things we worked with Laura closely, is that the advanced practice technician needed to have some skin in this game. So they needed to have some responsibility and liability. But I also think, Albert, I mean, would you really force a pharmacist to? Amjad came into your store and you said he has to work as an advanced practice tech.
Well,
would
you
you
don't
really
have to
force
say
someone
so.
to do
I
that?
mean, if you don't have to say it. I mean, in order for that pharmacist PIC to continue for employment, I think he's under a lot of pressure not to say no.
And you think that could actually happen in one of your stores?
I never force my pharmacists to do things that they don't not comfortable. But I'm sure that most other store that they are under pressure, that if that's the, I mean, they don't have to be. I mean, they could feel it. I mean, if they don't do it, they could lose their job.
I actually find that hard to believe. And I mean, I know I've worked in the chain industry and I've never been given ultimatums like that. So I'd be curious. I know you think it might happen. Do you know it happens?
I don't know it's happened, but I know it will happen.
You know it will happen.
Any other board member comments?
I'm a little confused because one of the reasons that we went with the standardized test was because I think we had the responsibility of the call-in phone prescriptions. And so, I mean, if they're not going to be doing call-in prescriptions, that kind of goes, it's inconsistent with the position of having the exam to make them do it. So.
And who calls in prescriptions from the doctor's office right now? It's not the doctor, is it?
Yeah, it's usually the
It's
secretary.
not going to be that many, actually.
It's a receptionist who
Yeah.
calls it in. So you're having a receptionist then calling into a pharmacy. So the receptionist could also make a mistake, right?
Could. And
I mean,
so if
do
the
we really need a
person receiving the
pharmacist?
call doesn't really know medications that well,
The one who's making the call, right?
but that's why you have that number 3 item, which is to indicate what it's for.
Sometimes.
Unless there's some kind of way that they can record the conversation, and the pharmacist could go back and double check if they feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, but you could do that. I mean, you could require that. If that's what would make you comfortable, you could require that.
Some way, I mean, if I'm responsible for something, there must be something for me to double check to make sure it's correct. But if it's out of my hand and I get responsible for it, I mean, who want that kind of responsibility?
But I kind of agree with Greg that if we're going, what are we going to really have them do? If we're going to have them take on a greater role,
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're giving them an exam so that they can take on a greater role.
Yeah, and we don't have physicians calling a pharmacist. It's translated already at the doctor's office,
right,
by a non-physician calling.
Right. And the purpose is being listed.
Hopefully, sometimes they'll tell you they don't know. If it's a receptionist, they may just tell you they don't know what it's for.
But if it
But
becomes
that's why
routine,
I would think the advanced practice technician would ask a pharmacist. If they ask and they say, we can't tell you what it's for, if I were in their shoes, I'd go ask the pharmacist.
But where's our pharmacy tech? Nikki?
I mean, there's a lot.
Why don't you come up here and give us your advice?
I mean, there's a lot of prescriptions you would know is right. I mean, there's only certain circumstances you'd even need
Do you feel comfortable taking a phone prescription for a new prescription over the phone if you were an advanced practice tech?
I would, but it depends. Like I've said, it depends on the medication, because there's controls that I see every day that I know what's for, and the receptionist would be able to tell me. If the receptionist didn't know what it was for and I did not know it, I would automatically hand that phone off to the pharmacist and be like, they're calling in something. Yeah, that is. I have no idea that the receptionist doesn't know this is out of my range.
You always have that option anyway, as a.
But
So I think that they can be trusted based on that.
Exactly. I mean, technicians know when it's outside their scope. They're not going to try to fake it. Right, Nikki?
Especially if our license is partially on the line, we're not going to risk it.
They're not responsible for it.
Thank you.
On behalf of the board's enforcement staff, however, I feel compelled to have to mention this. We are in the middle of an opioid crisis. Even with additional skin in the game, we see a lot of, I'm going to use the word scams, where basically someone in the doctor's office or someone that isn't in the doctor's office calls in, talks to a tech, they take the order over the phone, and suddenly drugs are walking out of the pharmacy. So Albert's idea about running a tape on those maybe provides some kind of backup so that there's actually, you get a feel for who did what and when. But I think that there is an increased risk here, even with the additional skin in the game, that you could have a tech pair up with someone that is or is not that is not authorized to
You're talking about a non-Schedule 2 item. now.
They
You're
could do
talking
that.
about
3 or 4,
Three or
and
four.
they're doing it
Maybe
now.
they could do it for the pharmacist.
Or
I mean, if I'm a
promethazine.
pharmacist and I take a bogus
Yeah.
call over the phone and the patient goes and picks it up, they could scam me as well.
They could.
Honestly,
but there's
why,
less, but
why
there's,
even involve the doctor's office? If you're going to do that, then just write a fake prescription.
well, for some reason, we keep finding these doctor pharmacy rings where two people know each other. They have a long-standing relationship with each other.
So
and
today, it's obviously a pharmacist in a tech.
Not necessarily. There's still techs that are taking things over the phone, or they hand the drugs to somebody prearranged. Like I said, it's just one of those things that I felt compelled to have to throw it out there. So that,
But I'm just
So
trying to
they're
figure
not
on
advanced
behalf of my
practice,
staff,
but
I
they're
want
taking
to
over the
defend
phone?
my.
But I just want to understand. But it's happening today. So what are we adding on that's making it more likely to happen in the future?
That was my question. Make sure you've got something there to make sure it doesn't happen in the future.
No, but
Or
you're,
you make
you're
calls.
saying, but are they authorized to take those calls today if they're not advanced
Oh
practice?
no, they're not supposed to be taking those
technicians?
calls today.
Initials, but on refills.
So
they
this
do.
is like fraud all around.
Dr. Stein.
And it still would be fraud all around. We're not
That
yet.
doesn't change, right?
Yeah. My attorney says it's potential fraud all around.
Right. Okay.
Gotta watch out for
Alleged
potential.
fraud.
I have some good news
Nice.
though. The whole issue of controlled substances is off the table. Federal law prohibits anyone except a pharmacist from transferring a prescription for a controlled substance or receiving
So
an
we're
oral
preempted
prescription.
by the federal law.
There you go.
There you go. Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
I thought
Your plane
wait.
ticket. Thank you.
I thought a receptionist
why we have an
could
attorney
call
in the
in
room.
a non-scheduled,
Careful,
schedule
we
3 or
got 2 over
4.
Oh,
And we've actually got a third.
Huh?
yeah. Okay, any other public comment? So is the board general, are you okay with some of the items on here then?
Yeah.
We have another
Not
comment.
too.
Thank you. Just for the folks that weren't in the other licensing committee meetings, there's, I think the number's 19 states that already allow technicians to take verbal prescriptions. We saw statements from Phil Burgess, who's the president of the Illinois Board of Pharmacy, that they've been allowed to take them for 40 years, and there's never once been an incident that's gone to the Illinois board surrounding techs taking new verbal prescriptions. And there's ISMP guidelines on technicians taking new verbal prescriptions where you read back everything to the person who gives it to you, you spell the drug, you ask for an indication, and if you follow those ISMP guidelines, you're just as safe, if not safer, than the pharmacist that would be taking a verbal prescription. So those were some of the arguments we heard in committee for techs taking verbals.
Great, thank you. Any other items on here that, except for this one regarding the new orders?
On number 6, provide administration of an immunization. Could you put if they have the certificate from APHA or board certified certificate for doing
I
that?
thought we didn't need that because in order to administer immunizations in California, you have to be certified.
You have to have.
Yeah.
You have to have.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
have to be,
you have
so
to have. Okay. Okay.
Does the, because I heard this morning that there's a pharmacy tech course, not just a pharmacist course. Is that required under the, is that allowed under this current law? Under this requirement that you're saying?
I think is.
Or is it only the APHA?
I think it's still the APHA test. It's still that course. It's just that Washington State is giving it
Okay.
specifically to a group of technicians.
It's still the same course? Because I thought I heard from Lori that it wasn't a different
I'm
one.
just looking. I think she's gone.
Yeah, I think it was a different one. Because the APHA one, I mean, I took it last year and it's pretty complicated
Yeah.
for a tech.
Hey, Amy, can we say that? I mean, we cannot. Ultimately, the PIC is responsible for technician. I mean, you cannot. I mean, remove the liability. I mean, we cannot say the whole liability. If the technician make a mistake, the technician will take the responsibility. We cannot say that. The PIC is still responsible for
I think so. Laura,
So,
is that true?
Under the model that you've been discussing, yes, because
And-
there's
and
still
that-
supervision. So the
Yeah. Yeah.
question is
So if that's the case, I mean, I think it's fair for the PIC is some kind of way when they want to double check the order for the accuracy. There's some way for them to check it. Otherwise it's very unfair. They respond for something that they had nothing to do with it. And
They have the right to check it any way they want to check it.
I think that prerogative's still there on the PIC. This is just saying the
how
things
they
they
gonna
may
check
do.
it? How they gonna check it? If the doctor call
Like
in,
you said.
unless that's a recording for them to go back to
They
check.
could do that.
Yeah.
If you're the PIC and you don't feel comfortable, you say, in my setting, you're not going to do that. I mean, these are just things they may do. Doesn't mean they have to do all of these.
Or in your setting,
Are you gonna guarantee they're not gonna lose the job if they refuse to do that?
I mean, I think you also have an opportunity as a PIC to have a recording. It's
Right.
just that I don't think we mandate it, but
PIC
that's
can
your
do anything
choice.
they want to do to assure themselves that it's accurate. They could have a recording, or they could choose to randomly check everything, things that the tech is doing.
So Laura, with understanding what Dr. Stein told us, since we know federal law does not allow technicians to take controlled drug, do we need to change the wording here, or is that just assumed that?
So my preference, simply because I've been your attorney for 2 years and I didn't know, would probably be to sort of put a nod in the language that says something consistent with the requirement law. Take orders, so that there's kind of it's a nod. Hey, there's something out there that we need to take.
Or just say that you can't do it for controlled substances.
That would work too. But
Or
there
say
might be
what?
other-
Or just say that except for controlled substances, receive and transfer prescriptions.
And I think we're going to talk more in terms of the next discussion item. It'll be regarding a statutory change under a PIC's responsibility. So I think we're going to get to the point that you raised coming up. So are these duties okay? I don't know, on compiling medication lists, I'm wondering if we should say compiling medication history lists or something, because I think the purpose, to clarify, is just to get a list for the history of all the things that they're taking for the pharmacist to review.
I was thinking we kind of put that in there more for long-term care rather than, because they kind of come under this umbrella.
Well, I think it's important too in the ambulatory setting, because when they first walk in, don't you want to know before you fill their prescription what they're taking?
For interaction.
Amy, I got an idea. Whenever I deal with the bank, a lot of those companies, they say you're being recorded for quality assurance. So maybe all the new prescription orders should have some kind of device like that the pharmacist could go back and check. Yeah, they have those devices.
Okay, any other, Mark?
I'm sorry, I thought I was almost summoned up to talk about the educational requirements for immunizing techs in Idaho. What it says is an appropriate course of immunization, but Idaho doesn't require the APHA training either. Idaho thought that APHA went beyond what you needed to be a clinician that was giving immunizations, and the fact that it talks about how you set up your pharmacy, and it talks about billing and the financial aspects, and they didn't figure that they needed to require to that extent. So when they did pharmacist immunization requirements, Idaho State developed their own 8-hour all-day program, and that's what most of the pharmacists in the state take, although you can take APHA too. So they used similar language when they developed the technician rules, and Washington State developed the first technician program, but it's even honed down a little bit more, because the 8-hour Idaho State one goes into clinical pharmacist responsibilities, and this gets down to really the simple act of administration. And I think it's a 5-hour course, but don't hold it to me, where you're, injecting oranges and then injecting each other, and it's all about the physical activity. So the training does fall, way short of an APHA full 12-hour course or more, I think is what it is.
Should we say, based on that, should we say perform the technical task of vaccine administration under the supervision of an immunization trained pharmacist? Because you still need that pharmacist.
Yeah, you absolutely. You'd have to have that pharmacist to do the.
Because you want to have them there. You don't want to have a tech there just to do it, because you need the pharmacist to do all of the clinical review ahead of time.
I would agree with that.
Well, medical assistants have been giving shots for years, and in doctors' offices, why is this different?
No, it is no. No, but what you need to do, having taken the training course, you need to understand when they should be given. Because remember, you're not going to do it under a prescription. You need to know when to give it, what patient conditions to consider before you give it. So there's pregnancy to consider. There's a lot of different things. Okay. So you need somebody to kind of screen the patient, and then you can turn to the tech and say, okay, that's fine to give. But I agree with you.
Thank you.
Okay, so generally, do you we'll talk about, do we need a motion? Okay, so the motion on there is pursue the statutory change to add the duties of an advanced pharmacy technician, which is basically the attachment 2.
Amy, I'm sorry, may I clarify? So could I just confirm that we're doing the policy, and then the context of the language modifications board staff can do afterwards with respect to the supervision, for the administration of the immunization under the supervision of an put those in afterwards?
Yeah, and I guess
the controlled substance piece.
Yeah,
as well.
the controlled substances as well as compile a medication.
Do we need to vote down the committee motion and add those and do it again, Laura, or do you want us?
I don't think you need to vote down the committee motion in this case. I think what you can do is do a separate motion to follow the committee's recommendation with the following changes.
Okay.
And then specify the changes that you want to make.
Okay. Hi, Mary.
Hi. Mary Staples with the National Association of Chain Drug Stores. Before you vote on this, I would like to ask your consideration of a 9th duty to this list. And that would be to under
eighth duty, right?
Yeah, under a 9th duty, right? Or 8th.
Only 7. Only have 7.
Okay, I was looking at right. Add an additional duty under A. That would be performing technical patient services such as taking temperatures, blood pressure, and CLIA wave tests, the swab, the skin scrape, and such, to include that. So that would free up the pharmacist so they can focus on the clinical services.
After appropriate training. I'm sure there's some training requirements.
All the other requirements that you're including, but those additional duties.
Makes sense.
Blood pressure, yeah, and other CLIA wave testing.
CLIA.
You want to explain CLIA wave testing, the safety?
Yeah, that's the one.
Laboratory standards.
The ones that patients can perform on their own can be assisted in this particular case.
Would be a swab of the cheek in order to put it into a machine, and yeah.
Okay, so we have who's going to make the motion for the amendments? There's 2 amendments, right, that we have on here. We're 3, because we're just going to add on an additional requirement.
Sure, I'll make it. So in number 2, we're going to accept
Give the motion.
New
or non-controlled meds is what you want to say in there?
Yeah. Pharmacists must take controlled substances prescriptions.
Or I was going to actually say, except for federally restricted. What did you say, Josh? Except for federal.
No, I just said except for controlled substances because that's easier. You don't have to refer to the federal.
Except for controlled substances.
And that would be for
except new or seek clarification about a prescription. So just add to except for controlled substances at the beginning of number 2. 8, add what she just said. And then 6, provide the technical task of administration of immunization under the supervision of a
Immunization trained pharmacist.
And you'd also need to add except for controlled substances to 4.
I would use Controlled Substances Act as the point is about. Then I would define it as CSA, right? So the act itself, because that makes it clear that it's federally preempted. It's just a slight thing, so it's a defined term.
Well, I don't disagree with you from a logical point of view. That would be inconsistent with how we generally do it in California law, because we refer specifically, typically, to the controlled substances as defined by California law, which has its own schedules. So referring to the Controlled Substances Act would actually introduce some ambiguity as to which controlled substances we mean by virtue of that definition.
Yeah, it's a tough call, but it seems like there's ambiguity both ways if we don't, right?
Right.
But doesn't it have to be federal? Because it has to be, if we're
Yeah.
talking about prohibitions under federal law, it has to be the...
Well, here's what would happen.
It's messy.
Yeah, it's messy because here's what would happen. The DEA, let's say that, someone who was not licensed to handle either intake a prescription or transfer a prescription did so. I don't believe the DEA would feel itself limited to the Federal Controlled Substances Act to the extent that it might be augmented by the State Controlled Substances Act and vice versa. So I don't think that we can resolve that ambiguity by way of this one provision. So I think it's better to just say, as a general rule, they can't do controlled substances, and leave that to later enforcement if there's any ambiguity about it.
But Debbie, are you okay with number 7 to compile medication lists or medication history or something about medication history lists on there? Okay.
Amy, have you guys discussed also the other tests for the technicians, like how the expand scope of practice on SB 493, the travel meds and the furnishing birth control pills, that they could check the assessment from the patients before the patient interviewed by the pharmacist to furnish them the producs.
So you mean handing out a piece of paper to them?
Yeah, could they hand it and then go through the assessment first before they give it to the pharmacist to check?
Like hand over the piece of paper to them, or what do you?
Well, after the patients check on all these assessments, they could go through that first before the pharmacist could do that. Have you guys talked about that? That could be an expand scope for technicians.
Wait, I'm not following it.
Anybody could do that.
Would you allow the technicians to do that? The APT to?
Well, couldn't a regular farm check? Because the pharmacist still has to check it, right?
Yeah, so it's okay. Okay, that's fine.
He's saying that if the patient fills out a self-assessment form before they give oral contraceptives, can the technician review it ahead of time before the pharmacist gets it? But I don't think you need an APT to do that, because you're really looking for is question 6 answered. If not, take it back to the patient and say, you need to complete the form.
I think as long as the pharmacist does it, then I don't see a problem.
Okay.
So Debbie, you have a motion. Is everybody clear on her motion?
My motion?
I'll second it. Okay. All right. Any more committee discussion? Public comment.
What was your name again?
I believe the committee made a decision on controlled substances based on the testimony of one individual, and with all due respect to the good doctor, I think he's incorrect. I don't think federal law restricts technicians from taking verbal prescriptions.
We'll research.
And we'll have our attorney look at that.
I'm fairly confident he is correct, but I will also double check.
So too. I think he is as well.
So does it remain in the motion or not as part of the...
Well, the motion, as Ann Sodergren specified earlier, was for the board to identify areas of possible amendments subject to the board staff's working on the actual language.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor of the motion? Raise your hand. Okay. The next part of what the committee discussed was how the proposed new duties would impact pharmacy services and the conditions that must be satisfied for an APT to perform such duties. As part of its discussion, the committee discussed how the proposal would benefit consumers and the requirements of a community pharmacy must fulfill to allow for the use of the APT, with the ultimate goal being increased patient access to pharmacists and clinical services. After discussion and consideration, the committee voted to recommend a statutory change to include that a community or ambulatory care pharmacy using an APT must ensure 1. The ATP duties are specified in the pharmacy's policies and procedures and are completed under the supervision of a pharmacist. So that's what you had asked about, Albert. So that's in there. 2. The PIC is responsible for the ongoing evaluation of the accuracy of the duties performed by the APT. 3. A pharmacist physically hands the patient or patient's agent the medication and provides patient information. I think that was supposed to be new medication, right?
It says new.
Oh, some of the actual language? Okay.
Actual language just say new.
Yeah, because it actually is. So the pharmacist must personally provide all new prescription medications directly to the patient or patient's agent and must provide patient information consistent with the provisions of 4052A8 or other clinical services. 4. A pharmacist shall provide other clinical services. 5. A record is created identifying the person responsible for the preparing and dispensing of the prescription medication. Victor.
Question. On number 3, so if we have all these advanced practice technicians do all the other work, I would like to see the pharmacist personally provide or even new or refill prescriptions to the patients rather than
Want to change
just
that?
new. Yes,
To take out the new and just put
all prescriptions, yes. So that way you will have the direct contact with the patients. That pharmacist should review the profile and even hand out the refill prescription to the patient directly at the counter.
Board members. Pharmacist is going to be essentially a clerk then, right?
No, because if you fill the prescriptions, how will you know that they fill it correctly? I mean,
So
the
if-
only way
if-
for me to verify this when I hand out the prescriptions, I could double check it at the same time when I counsel the patient, even new or refill.
But it doesn't say that.
Always do it.
It says handout. It basically says handout. That doesn't say that you're going to check everything.
It was to say they should check on all the new and refills at the time of the handing out. Well, after they counsel the patient with all new or refill, you can have the technician sign and give it to the clerk, hand it to the patient. But at least I think the pharmacist should be the one personally interview the patient at that time.
Board members, what do you think? Debbie.
Well, I guess I don't think I think the pharmacist has the ability today to hand out all prescriptions. I think we're trying to set, what are the requirements, and so I think they have to hand out new ones. What does it say? That they will provide all new prescriptions directly to the patient or the patient's agents and must provide patient information consistent with the provisions for other clinical services. So I think that's an absolute. I think once again the pharmacist can still do refills when it's appropriate, but I don't think it's necessary for them to hand out every refill prescription.
Now, if we want to say they need to counsel on refills, if they have an APT, I might go with you on that one.
Well, but if you only counsel if there was a change, right? And if there's a change, then technically it's a new prescription.
Yeah, but if you're counseling it, are you sure? Do you have any questions for me? Do you know how to take it? I noticed you haven't taken it in didn't get your last refill. Something that actually reaches out to the patient.
Or is that what's provisions of 4052A8? Please.
Let me read that again. Provide consultation, training, and education to patients about drug therapy, disease management, and disease prevention.
So what does 4 mean? A pharmacist shall provide other clinical service. That's really broad. I don't know if it really says much.
So that was one of the things that was discussed at the last licensing, and it was intended to mirror the tech check tech in a hospital where it's saying that the pharmacist is redirected to other patient care services. Unfortunately, just because of the timing, we didn't have the opportunity to really capture elegant language. So it was to try to capture kind of what the thought of the committee was, with the understanding that we would be refining that to make it a little bit more elegant. So I apologize.
Could we say could provide other clinical services besides required consultation? Because that's basically, that should be just, for me to say I want to have an APT just to do consultation doesn't make sense. But if I'm going to do it for other clinical services beyond just consultation.
Beyond required cons.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's good. Make it more elegant.
Public comment.
Wow, we're wearing them out. Oh, no, not
Mark.
quite.
Gonna wear a hole in the carpet out there.
So, California's been on the cutting edge of pharmacists' expanded duties, and I think the whole reason we're here today is to discuss what tasks we can take off their plate so that they can perform those duties. And I think the physical task of handing a refill to a patient is not a clinical duty and would take away from the pharmacist's ability to offer all of the other services that you allow in California that we're struggling to offer now without these tech expanded duties. So I think I would support the language as written. The amendment that happened in the last licensing committee where you mandated a pharmacist has to do clinical activities, and certainly that should be above and beyond required counseling, I think was a great amendment. But the physical handing of a refill to a patient, I think is a clerical duty.
Are you okay, Victor, with not having that if we put in the fact that they have to do other clinical services besides consultation?
Okay.
Is that okay with you? Okay. Any other public comment? Okay. All in favor?
Wait, have we made a motion to modify that?
No. Debbie, why don't you do that?
Okay, so I want as presented in attachment 2, I think this is 4115 6B.
4.
I would like to, under number 4, add a pharmacist shall provide other clinical services in addition to, is that what you want to say?
In addition to required consultation.
Required consultation.
Second.
And we're okay with with number 3, right? The new prescriptions. Do we want to add? Do we want to keep that in there?
Yeah, I think it's.
Okay. Second to the motion.
I did.
Greg.
Right.
Okay. And any other public comment? Otherwise, we'll take a vote. All in favor? Okay. The last one is pursue a statutory. No, it's. I think those are the only 2.
That's it. I was
Yep.
gonna say, I don't have any more.
The next is discussion and consideration of the employment of APTs in a closed-door pharmacy, which provides pharmacy services for patients of skilled nursing and long-term care facilities. I think the other thing that, before I go into that, the committee did discuss that we still need to determine what to do in a hospital. So that is coming, and I think we're going to, I think that's the next item. I'll wait to discuss that. So during prior committee meeting discussion, the committee considered the possible role of how an APT would work in a closed-door pharmacy and how consumers would benefit. The committee briefly discussed suggested changes as it relates specifically to a closed-door pharmacy and if such pharmacies should have separate requirements. The committee ultimately decided that it was not necessary, but indicated the committee will consider patient consultation requirements for patients receiving medications from closed-door pharmacies in the future. I think what happened is the committee actually recommended that the Communication and Public Ed Committee take this on and review about consultation requirements for closed-door pharmacies, because it appears that these patients may be exempt in some way from being counseled. So Ricardo, you'll be put on the Communication and Public Ed. We're going to punt it to you. Item D, discussion, unless there's any public comment on the closed door. Item D, discussion and consideration of employment of APTs in inpatient hospital. The committee briefly considered the role an APT could play in an inpatient hospital. The committee deferred much of its discussion due to action on our recommendations related to APTs in an inpatient hospital and await guidance from the board on the possible creation. I think we did that today. So we'll have to go back to the committee, have them work on it. I did reach out to CSHP because when we had the meeting, they actually were having their mid-year, their clinical meeting. So I actually talked to the CEO of CSHP and asked them to help us draft something and bring it to the next licensing committee for hospital pharmacy. Item E, or any public comment on item D? Item E, discussion and consideration of current renewal requirements for pharmacy technicians and possible changes thereto. In prior meetings, the committee has considered the current renewal requirements for all pharmacy technicians. In April 2017, the committee questioned if CE should be a condition of renewal, and this is just for general pharmacy techs. As part of its discussion, the committee contemplated if such a requirement would become a hurdle to renewal. The committee was advised by the public that given the availability of courses, many of which can be done online and no cost, such a requirement would not be a hurdle. The committee discussed if inclusion of a CE requirement as a condition of renewal for a pharmacy tech was necessary, and the committee decided that a requirement was not necessary. And attachment 3 contains an excerpt from the April 2017. Board member comments? Public comments? Licensing statistics, attachment 4 lists the licensing statistics for the first quarter of the fiscal year. The board received a little over 4,700 applications, most of which were for intern pharmacists and pharmacy technicians. As of September 30th, the board has issued a little over 4,000 licenses and renewed almost 16,000 licenses. Future committee meeting dates are listed for 2018, January 16th, April 19th, June 26th, and September 26th. And a summary of the August committee meeting is provided in attachment 5, along with articles and background information that was considered by the committee. The draft summary will be provided from October 2017 if available. Okay, that's it for the licensing committee. I guess we're going to move into closed session. Laura, is that the timing?
We can.
I think we need to go into the compounding committee. We can get started for, what time do we have?
4:30 is.
So we want to do 15 minutes. Do you want to get into
What about org development? Can you do that?
Oh yeah, let's do org development. Perfect.
Why don't we do org development?
We can do that in 15 minutes.
Maybe.
Want to get started on it? I'm trying to find it in here.
Enforcement, Amy, how long?
It's gonna take a while.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, because we got to talk about the compounding. Yeah, we'll probably do it tomorrow. Did you do your org development? Your executive officer
Yes,
report?
I'll give you
All
a private one later.
Okay. Org development committee. So item A, discussion and consideration of proposal to amend BPC section 4400 to require collection of application and renewal fees for government-owned facilities. Ginny and I have discussed this. Apparently, government facilities have been exempt for a while.
Ever since I've been at the board, predates my arrival here, that government facilities did not have to pay licensing fees. And it was questioned when we brought the ambulance restocking bill through the committees, because at that point we were exempting the wholesalers that were owned by EMS agencies that would be government owned. The immediate reaction was, why are you exempting them? I checked with the Department of Public Health, who does not exempt anyone from paying a fee. So we took the fees away. Right. We added fees to the EMS agencies that would become ultimately licensed as wholesalers. And at that point, we made a commitment to finance that we would go through and undo the fee exemption that existed for government facilities. So what you see here in attachment 1 is the removal of the government exemption from having to pay fees annually.
So about 600 government-owned site licenses will be affected by the repeal of the fee exemption and increase board revenue by $390,000. Is that correct, Ann? I think there's a 0 missing in there.
Yes, I did this
Yes.
estimate. She's gonna
Okay.
point out that this one was mine. Yes,
So do we need a board motion to move ahead? Is this,
this will be a statutory, ultimately a reg too, but statutory.
is there a motion to move forward with removing government-owned facilities and
So
adopt?
moved.
Second.
Okay, movement and second. Public comment.
No one's going to object out there?
I don't know if anyone from the government's
Let
out
them
there.
pay?
All in favor?
In government exemption. Do not vote.
Okay, unanimous. Budget update report. Final budget report for fiscal year 1670 is an attachment 2. The fiscal year ended on June 30th of this year, but the final numbers were not available at the July board meeting. Therefore, the information is being provided for this meeting. The board received $20,323,000 in revenue originating from the following. 83% of our revenue came from licensing, 10% from citation and fees, and then minimal from cost recovery and interest. The board expended a little over $21.6 million, which is approximately 97% of its authorized budget. The largest expenditure for the budget is in personnel, 63%, 70% in enforcement, which is at our attorney fees.
Those would be Office of Administrative Law and the AG's office, yes.
Attachment 2 includes the final budget charts for board revenue and expenditures for fiscal year 16-17. Any board member comments? Public comments. Item 2, budget report for fiscal year 17-18. The new fiscal year started in July 1st of this year. The board's authorized expenditures are $22,317,000, so about $2 million more. In July, the department transitioned to a new statewide accounting and budgeting system known as Fiscal. The department went live on July 10th on this Fiscal system. As with any type of significant change, there have been unexpected challenges and hurdles or bumps along the way to overcome during implementation. So expenditure and revenue reports have been difficult to extract from the system, and it's caused a delay in the department being able. Is this going to be addressed at our upcoming meeting that we have next week? No? We're not going to talk about this, Anne?
Unless you want to talk about it.
I can tell you that we got the first month the report now, so it's coming out.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, unfortunately it was just really slow. There were some unexpected problems that didn't come up during the testing phase.
Yeah.
But it seems like now things are starting to get moving. So
as you're referring to, is Jenny and I and Anne are meeting with the
Director, yeah.
DCA head and then also the pro rata committee to talk about the finances next week.
This is more deals with the speed with which bills are paid and what kind of paperwork is required in order to get a bill paid. And it transcends, it's not just the Department of Consumer Affairs that's having problems, it's pretty much everyone.
Is it affecting our license payments at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
So we are
It's
still
not. They're fine.
Our bill paying.
Yeah.
It's just our ability to pay bills.
Our credits
Our
being
bill paying that
damaged.
had an issue. Yes.
Okay. Any public comments? Item 3, fund condition report. Attachment 3 includes a fund condition report as of October 27th, 2017. We have approximately 4.9 months in reserve as of October, right?
2017.
Okay. All right. So a little bit more.
Yeah.
In 2018-19, as you see, it goes up to 2019-20. It'll be 5.9 months in reserve. The proposed governor's budget for 18-19 will be released in January of 2018, and it'll include incremental changes to the board's authorized expenditures for items such as employee compensation, approved budget change proposals, etc. The board staff will provide an updated fund condition report in the 18-19 governor's budget at the next board meeting. Board member comments? Public comments? The board member reimbursement information is on attachment 4. Board members may waive their per diem payments or request partial reimbursement of travel, and you'll see a summary of those on attachment 4. Board member attendance information is on attachment 5 as well. So we'll see the percentage of board member attendance. I think Alan, you and Victor and I are at 100%. I know. Well, the officers, I guess we have to be, right? Yeah, we still have some. I think we have one board member that actually has only been to one board and committee member. Is that true for the whole year?
That is what our records reflect, and I have
This-
every
for
confidence
this fiscal
that given
year,
that
yes.
we've got minutes.
Oh, that's always.
Board member comments. Public comments. Future board meeting dates are listed on your attachment for 2018, as well as petitioner board meetings are also listed. And are we going to rotate those for Northern and Southern Cal, the petitioner? So we can give them.
We try to do it based on where the majority of the petitioners live.
Just to
but
make it
it
easier
seems
on
like
them.
we kind of do switch back and forth, just that how it seems to work out.
Perfect. Okay, that is the Org Development Committee report. Hey, I brought it in under 4:30.
Just time for a quick break.
So we're going to take a quick break and then we'll adjourn into closed session, and we'll resume tomorrow morning with the Compounding and Enforcement Committee.
Right. So this is entirely up to you, but Josh just mentioned that he was going to be a little bit late on arrival. Do you want to instead recess to closed session first thing tomorrow morning? Like we'll go into close
In addition to tonight? you
Yeah,
mean?
because I don't think we'll finish closed session tonight.
Okay.
But it's up to you. I'm just throwing
So
it
we
out
can
there.
recess and then start the public
Start
meeting later.
8:30 tomorrow morning. Start with closed session, and then maybe have a
What
set
time do you think we'll be ready to open up so that everyone's
I thought
aware?
Josh might be late tomorrow.
Which is what I'm saying is that then if he can't be here for closed session, so if you want to do your
Should we
closed
do
session,
like 9:30 then? I think that'll give us enough time.
I think that should be enough time.
Pardon me?
You've got audience members that may prefer to leave and not stick around.
Yeah, it's up to you.
No, I'm just saying that. But we're gonna do this now because we have an appointment at 4:30
Today, right?
Right.
Yeah, the question is.
And then tomorrow morning, what I think she's suggesting is we go into closed session right off the bat, and then open up to open session.
I was giving you the option.
Yeah.
It's entirely your call.
Because Josh won't be here.
Right. Just Josh's time versus the audience's time. That's all.
How many are here for the meeting for the Enforcement and Compounding Committee meeting? Oh, 3, 4. Does it make a difference to you whether we start out at 8 or we start out at 9:30? 9:30 sounds great. Okay.
Sleep in, everyone.
All right. Give you a little chance to. Okay. So meeting adjourned till tomorrow, and we'll start out with closed session in the morning, and we hope to open up again around 9:30.